really appreciate you joining.
Good to be here, man. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm excited for this one, and as are quite a few people in the fandom. Actually, a few people I talk to on Discord. So you are definitely a known presence in the disco community, which makes sense as I've invited you onto a Disco Elysium podcast. I think I'd be barking up the wrong tree if I hadn't established that bit. We will, of
Can I
course,
can I get a like a brief
of course, you can go
summary
for
of
it.
what that is? What
What,
the
which bit?
notoriety?
Oh, your notoriety. The art that you'd done on the Pale stuff, right? Where you had, so you were originally signed up to do the art book, right? And then from there, you went on to, you got licensed to do another piece of design around Pale, some of the apparatus that was associated to dealing with the Pale in the world of Elysium. Do you remember the document? It's like the really beautiful black and white piece that you did. That's the one I'm talking about.
Okay.
Does it? I have got the right Josh Jenkins, haven't I?
Yeah, no, totally. I was just curious. I'm so oblivious to whatever my presence is. So it's always nice to hear as an artist, like we are a little, we do get excited when people are like, hey, but
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
always surprised by it still.
Yeah, it's a funny old thing. It's like as I was going through like who's going to be interesting to speak to about this, and I was like you generally kind of work through the credits of the ZAUM team right first, and you kind of go right who's on Twitter and all the rest of it, and then I think I was already following you, and I was like, oh, of course, yes, I need to speak to Josh because he did lots of the arty stuff. So rather fitting for a game that is so artistically charged, right? So yeah, there you go, folks. That's the Josh Jenkins we're dealing with. It's the correct one, so we're off to a good start. So we will get to some of that stuff, but you've got quite an interesting career that you're in now, right? Some of the work that you're doing, and I do like to get to know people a little bit. So we'll do some of the nice, relaxing stuff first, and get to know you a bit, Josh. So people will be familiar with these kind of traditional warm-up questions, and they are just really around some of your interests. First of all, of course, I need to ask you, I'm assuming people who work in games have some interest in games, so I'm guessing you're a big gamer, and I'd like to know, can you recall when you first got into gaming? What was your first experience with it?
So I'm 45 years old, 46. Shit, I could be 47. As you get older, it just starts to slip. It just doesn't matter anymore. But the history of my life is the history of video games. Like it's literally spanning the same period of time. So I watched the entire like evolution of it. So Atari 2600 when I was a kid, and then on to the NES and then the Super NES, and then TurboGrafx 16, Genesis, like PlayStation finally, and Xbox, and I had them all. Like
Yeah.
I followed the entire kind of progression through. It's always been something, and then online. Um, it wasn't always cool. I'll tell you that. It wasn't always for everybody. I do, and I think people have a tendency to like rewrite themselves as the victim in their story, the underdog that came from nothing. But I seem to vividly remember nerds were not cool in any capacity.
Yes, same.
When I was growing up.
Yeah, so I'm 30. Again, I have to remember 35 now, and I can remember a time where I was like one of the only kids in my school that was really into video games because everyone else was playing sport and doing cool stuff like that, and I was the nerd, pretty much. But yeah, you're absolutely right, and it's interesting now how they have become cool, right? It has definitely become a cooler thing these days to be a nerd.
I was this was a long time ago. I can't remember specifically. I think the two touch points for video games were Grand Theft Auto and Madden.
Mm.
Uh, neither of which I'm really into. So I didn't really see it coming. But I was over at a friend's house visiting him, and I remember he had like an EGM magazine, which I hadn't seen in forever. And I popped it open, and the E3 had like Linkin Park and Tony Hawk, and I'm like, what the
Yeah.
fuck is going on with the, like, I just was oblivious to, but that was the moment I realized I'm like, oh, it's everywhere now.
Mm. Yeah, I remember so the PlayStation 1 was the first kind of attempt at marketing to adults, right? So Sony really leaned into this isn't just like, it's not Nintendo, which is aimed at kids in quotation marks, but it was this was the thing that you had if you were a serious person and you wanted to like play really cool stuff, right? And it became a really a bit of genius marketing, really, that they managed to frame it that way.
Yeah. I love it. I also kind of hate it sometimes. I think everybody has this. If you've been in this space long enough, you're just like, oh my god, the internet is such an asshole. And then other times, you look around like, well, I'm glad this is ubiquitous technology and we're all on the same page. So I mean,
Yeah,
it's just
yeah,
people, right?
yeah. Was there so were there any particular favorites of yours? Let's talk sort of, in the 90s when you were a wee pup. Were there any particular favorites of yours you remember from that time, the ones that really caught your attention?
I think the one that really, really like I went, oh, this is the thing is Metal Gear. The first Metal Gear. I want to say NES or Super NES. I'm not
Yeah,
sure which. You know, but the way it integrated like puzzles into actual like there's a part where there's lasers and you find a pack of cigarettes and you smoke the cigarettes and it exposes it. Yeah, it's stuff like that I went, oh wow, okay, because there was a clear delineation between puzzles and like Zelda, like action and
yeah,
stuff. But the way they started integrating, or Contra, I guess, the way they started integrating really thoughtful puzzles into it, was it like I was like, oh shit, okay, we're getting to another level here.
yeah. And it's interesting you point out Metal Gear, and I wasn't cool enough to be around for the first Metal Gear games. The first Metal Gear proper, but. So, how old was I when the PlayStation 1 came out? About 7 years old or something like that. And I think it was about a year after release. I got one for Christmas or something. Um, and I remember playing a demo disc. Remember those? They were
Yep.
great.
And,
A demo of Metal Gear Solid. And there was, the cinematic presentation and the way it all started out. We'd never seen anything like it, right? And it was just like, it really felt like for the first time we were playing in a movie, and
yep.
it completely blew my mind. A fantastic gaming experience.
Yeah, Kojima really has like a flair for drama. I mean, obviously, but even early on, still the mechanics that he developed, are just ubiquitous in every game now,
Yeah,
despite his like, larger than life persona.
yeah, he's an interesting one. What did you think of Death Stranding?
I
Because
never
that's quite a
played it.
divisive one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Later, could you? So I do like Strange, but I like a little Strange left of center.
Yeah, yeah,
I can watch David Lynch to a point. I acknowledge it's brilliant.
yeah,
I find that stuff really, really fascinating, but there's a point where I tune out when it gets too abstract and too crazy. So I do like a good sense of abstract, but once you lose me, I'm lost. So Kojima tends to do that to me. What I think is fascinating is how many backpacks I'm now seeing in games. Like there's a
mm,
trend that comes out, and I have to follow trends because this is my industry, right? So, but like last year, seeing how many games had giant backpacks, I'm like, damn, that guy, like he like that was not gonna be the mechanic I thought would pass on, but
Funny.
he's a trendsetter.
I of course didn't pick up on that because I'm not looking at it in the same. But that's interesting, actually. And I guess it's probably one of the more complicated systems in the game. But there's like I can't remember the name of the scanner that he has, but it basically maps out terrain, right? And yeah, the
Yeah.
little you can press. I think, it's such an addictive thing to do as well. Like you're walking around and you press the button to map out the geometry of the area you're in, and you get like red marks where it's steep and green where it's like. And I was like, that's just incredible. And I always thought that would be the one that kind of ended up taking off, but I guess it's it's a bit more complicated to implement than Big Backpack, right?
Yeah, it looks like I mean, now I just checked the price of robot dogs. They're like $3,000. I mean, the price is coming down astronomically.
Yeah,
But there's something about the design, and they're like little lidar on their. It looks like this spinning mouth, like a mole. It's
yeah,
really off-putting and strange. And something I love about Kojima stuff really is the design. Like he clearly looks at the world, looks at the technology of the world, and he's like, how can I make this weird?
mm,
And him and Ashley Wood, he's generally the guy that's doing his concept art, just figure out the strangest way. And that little like duck thing, which is
yeah,
basically like his lidar, right? Like
yeah,
the way that he can flip it around, just brilliant design wise.
yeah. And of course, the baby in the container as well is obviously
Yeah.
iconic. Yeah, yeah, amazing stuff. Um, so do you have a game that you can confidently say is your favorite of all time, or do you steer away from a definitive best ever?
Uh, you know, I think it's BioShock.
Well, that's handy.
It is very handy. I'm not just saying that because Ken is my boss. Like I am absolutely saying that because I genuinely, I told him when he interviewed me, and he goes, "Are you familiar with my games?" And I go, "Dude," I go, "You're Willy Wonka, and I just got the golden ticket. So yes, I fucking know who you are, man."
Oh mate, to be honest, like I don't think anybody could, be critical of you and say, "Oh, you're only doing it because you're boss," because it's an amazing game. Funny enough, we actually I talked about it with Argo and how much we enjoyed the twist. Spoilers if you haven't played Bioshock for anyone watching, but the whole "would you kindly" thing is obviously now iconic, right? And what I really like about that is it's kind of, we've seen other games do it since, like Hotline Miami and The Last of Us 2, where they kind of question why you are continuing with this, stream of violence just because it's objectives, right? But really, Bioshock was the precursor to that and did it in a far smarter way than I think anyone has done since.
Yeah, I agree. And BioShock Infinite, I think, is brilliant too. Ken is such a proven commodity at Take Two. And I think my theory, part of it, is that we actually have a way to determine from BioShock 1
Mm,
made this amount of money and still has this standing power. BioShock 2, no disrespect, but not Ken Levine, and then BioShock Infinite. And you can see how the second one kind of fell away.
mm,
And so it's like the secret spice is Ken.
yeah,
And it's studios, like movie studios, and we have to, they tend to get the wrong idea. Like, you have a really, really good movie, and they're like, this was great because of car chases. Like, no, it wasn't. It was good because there's like 50 people that really put their heart and soul into it. They always seem to take the thing away, but it's undisputed that Ken is the secret spice.
yeah. Yeah, there are these kind of monolithic characters in game development. There's a, I don't know, like a dozen or so of them, right, where you kind of see their name attached to something, and you kind of have an immediate confidence that it's going to be pretty good, right? Like I don't know, for example, we don't know what Dan Houser is up to at the moment because he left Rockstar, right? So when he eventually pops up, it doesn't really matter. Half the marketing's done by having his name as the director, right? Because people know what to expect, and it's the same thing happens with Kojima. I'm sure when Robert Kurvitz eventually resurfaces, people will immediately, be all over it, just as they were with Argo. So yeah, it's really
Yeah,
cool.
somehow I always tell my family, because they don't know anything about games or anything like that. And the way I tell them is they're like, "How you doing?" And I go, "There's like maybe 5 real rock stars in games, and I work for one of them directly." And they're like, "Okay, got it."
Yeah. And it's funny because, like,
Shorthand.
obviously doing this podcast thing, people, like, I don't tell many people in my social circles, mostly because they wouldn't get it. And I can't really be bothered with explaining to something that it's not going to convince them to now be a Disco Elysium fan, right? So I'm very limited. But when people do ask, I have a similar thing. It's like, well, if you imagine like your favorite thing in the world, and you get to go and talk about it and speak to the people who made it, that's pretty much what
Yeah.
I'm doing. Yeah.
There's that scene from Whiplash. I'm assuming you've seen
Great
Whiplash.
film. Yeah.
That dinner scene where he's, trying to be the greatest jazz drummer, and his 2 of his brothers, one's like going to academia and the other one's going to sports, and the way his like uncle or whatever goes, "And whatever your drumming thing is."
Yeah.
He's like, "Bitch, I'm trying to be the best in the world at this thing that you don't." And that's what makes it so perfect, that it's drumming, because it is this thing where it's like, you're the guy that sits in the background, and like, what do what does
Yeah.
it matter?
Yeah.
I feel like I've been feeling that way my entire life.
Yeah.
And that movie finally like really articulated. I'm like, oh, thank God. Everybody has an over religious aunt that genuinely wants to hear about your Christmas just rolled around. So I'm sure everybody experienced this.
Yeah.
And she will inadvertently be so dismissive to you. She's not trying to be, but she
Yeah.
will be.
Yeah.
When you're trying to describe this cool thing that you do, because she hasn't really touched on reality in like 30-40 years. So like
just,
movies.
yeah, that's lovely, darling. I'm really happy for you. And you're like, oh God. It's interesting you talk about Whiplash there, because I got the sense. So I listened to about half of "I'm Your Buddy," the episode that you were on recently, which is you were specifically talking about a Guillermo del Toro film, right?
Yeah.
It's Spanish, right? What's it called?
Devil's Backbone.
That's the one.
Devil's Backbone. Yeah.
So you're obviously a bit of a movie buff. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
So, was it movies first that came? Was that like the first love for you, or was it games, or did they kind of happen at the same time?
So I'm the product of a single mother. Dad was never around. It's the 90s. And my mom was hustling like all the time. So me, like a lot of my best friends that are roughly the same age as me, all the same origin story. It's like we kind of grew up on the television. We grew up on movies, and this is a thing that I will always want to be a part of, like storytelling, very, very specifically. I think I have, I mean, what I do really is abstract problem solving.
Yep.
And I mean, I think that's what art in video games specifically is. I'm not drawing without purpose. I'm trying to solve problems. And I think movies and television and games and all that stuff, comic books, all that stuff, like really appealed to me, to whatever the thing is in my brain that wants to, like, why did they do this? Why red instead of blue? Why whatever? And it just kind of blew my mind up. So I would say, like, really anything involving storytelling, like movies are awesome, television is awesome. I put it all under the same banner, and I'm a fan of all of it. I guess media would be the appropriate like banner for it.
I'm with you 100%. Yeah. I'm not in the fortunate position to like. I mean, I create, but I envy your position as someone who's like directly involved in storytelling, because I just never had the knack for it. But I absolutely love all of its various forms in the media. That's interesting. So what about books? Was there, do you have any like? Because obviously storytelling is at home in paper form first and foremost. So is there any books or that you've got like a special interest in?
Absolutely. It's one, and I recommend it to everybody I can conceivably find that is still reading books. I will accept audiobooks. It's the book Geek Love.
Geek Love.
Are you familiar with it?
No, that's why I'm writing it down, because every time someone recommends me a book, I'm definitely going to go read it. But give us a quick summary. What's
Absolutely. So it is a American Gothic story. It takes place in the Depression era, and it is about a carnival barker and his geek wife. If you unfamiliar with the original connotation of geek, geeks were fans of the circus because the circus was really big at that time, but they didn't have any applicable skills, so they engaged in kind of gross things
mm-hmm.
just to like shock and awe kind of thing. So big one attributed to is like biting the heads off of chickens
Oh, okay,
is
yeah.
like what they would do live, and that's kind of what geeks are. But they really fell on hard times, and they were like, why don't we just produce our own freaks for our freak show, because it's such a high commodity. And so they engage in this reverse eugenics, and and then they produce like 7 children, and those children kind of go off and kind of make an empire
Mm.
of freakness. And I heard this when I originally heard this. I went, oh, this is just gonna be some edge lord shit. This is just gonna be this, like woo, like the grossest thing. But it isn't at all, because these are high value commodities,
Yeah.
even though they're completely twisted and destroyed and stuff. So their perception of themselves and the way they're raised as like flowers, they're these precious things. And so the way they interact with the world, and particularly the way the world interacts with them, the way they understand that it's all about being special,
Mm.
in the right kind of special and the wrong kind of special, and what people that aren't special and what they want to be. It's this amazing study. Catherine Dunn, the woman that wrote it, she never really wrote another book, and she worked on this one for like 10 years. It's
Wow.
her one and only like masterpiece. And yeah, it's really special. It's dark. It's a rough road. So like, if anybody out there that listens to this, or you yourself, David, like just gird your loins, prepare yourself, because it gets
Yeah. I
brutal.
mean, it sounds up my street, to be honest, and it's interesting you touch on like the longevity of the time spent on building, that world for that book, and it reminds me of the guy. I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation. Nick Pizzolatto, is it the guy behind
Yep,
True
yep,
Detective?
yep. I
And the
think I know exactly where you're going with this.
well, let's see if you get the bingo score here, because my understanding is that actually he'd been building on this whole thing for years and years. And the reason that True Detective season 1 is like in my opinion, the most perfect season of television that's ever been created. It's so good and so well thought out and so profound, because he'd spent a huge amount of time doing it, right? Were you correct?
100%. I thought you were going to extend this out, because a year later, season 2 comes out, and it's criminally bad.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh, he's lost it. I'm like, you don't understand what it's like to work on something for many, many years. There's quite a few creators that you can really see a delineation, a delta between some of their movies and other movies, and then they kind of get it back and everything. I Get Out, which I think is
Yeah.
pretty fantastic. Jordan Peele said that he was writing and rewriting that story over and over and over again when he was doing Key and Peele.
Yeah.
Like it was not a maximum efficiency
Yeah.
in that storytelling, and it shows, but it also shows in Us and Nope, which I are movies I really really like, but they don't touch
Yeah,
like
Get
that
Out's pretty. The only one I haven't seen out of the three is Nope. Us, I thought was
one.
brilliant.
It
Just
is.
I really liked that. It was about um the difference that your environment makes on who you are as a person, right?
Yeah.
Big twist as a spoiler warning. Is it? is it all of them, or is it just is it the daughter, I think, that was switched or something like that? I'm
Yeah.
trying to remember the detail
Yeah.
now.
I mean, that's the idea, right? That if you just put somebody in a different environment,
Yeah.
you will fundamentally change them.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
and that it is arbitrary. That's
yeah.
the other part.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Really, really clever stuff. And he also, like, you never kind of lose that Jordan Peele flavor, like the Beastie Boys. Is it Beastie Boys? Oh no, Beach Boys, and then NWA. Like, you know, there's this whole scene where there's this huge fight in a house on like the beach or whatever, and just this really funny imagery of like this violence going on, and the switch between the Beach Boys music and then NWA. It's just it's brilliant, really, really good.
Yeah, genius.
Okay, I need to get my notes up. All right, this is going to be a great question, I think. You have to remove BioShock because you've already named it. But I will go through one by one. I as a person who is well versed in media, I'm really excited to see what you say on these now. So you get to recommend to our audience one game, one book. Again, you have to remove Geek Love. So find another book in your brain. One movie, one musician or a band, artist, whatever, and one TV show.
How many people do you talk to that try to eke in like more than one? I want to play your game. Like, I really do.
Everybody does it. So everyone's like, well, can I just, well, I don't want to leave this out and I don't want to leave that out. It's, to be honest, I'm more excited about the conversation it sparks than the real answers, to be honest. So.
Absolutely. So for game, the one that I played fairly recently, like in the past couple of years, that really, really caught me off guard was Chants of Sonar.
I've not heard of that.
So me being a designer, there's a distinct difference between designers and illustrators. Shockingly, some of my favorite illustrators that I've worked with look at my design, which is very simplified and geometric and everything, and they're like, I can't do that. I'm like, how can you not do that? Like, I definitely can't do what they can do, kind of stuff. But Chance of Sonar is really, really articulately, brilliantly designed game specifically, but it's about language. So when you go into the world and the first person that you communicate with, you don't understand. And he's like pointing at something and he keeps saying a word and it's door. And you go over and you go to the door and you go, oh, that word means door. And as you progress through the level, it's all about context clues for language. And even cooler than that. So, and then you realize, like, oh, I'm in a tower. And when you go to the next level of tower, there's a more complicated language. But the thing that, and this just kind of keeps going, and you keep trying to figure out all the language stuff, like as it's going on. And what you realize also is that there's a game within a game that is connecting these people, and you are becoming like a cipher or a decipherer of language so that these levels of the tower can then find peace with one another because they don't understand each other. And it happens so organically and beautifully, and the puzzles are so like engaging. You know, they're not like fucking impossible where you have to go on YouTube, but they're also, you really stop and have to think about it. And every time you figure out what a word is, you go, oh shit, that's right, which is just a great feeling to have.
Yeah, a good puzzle is one that makes you feel clever, right? It's not one that's like deliberately obtuse and annoyingly hard. Although they have their place, of course. But yeah, I always think that you, especially in games, you have to make people feel like they are still, you know, capable of powerful things, right?
I do think at some point in time somebody will attempt to crack BioShock, but we've seen this with like Last of Us and Fallout, where you're like, okay, I think the translation works, right? So then you have to go, okay, and we've I think we've cracked comic books, which was really difficult to crack for a really, really long time. Once the director and the writer just give in to the design of the world, like instead of trying to make this medium look like mine. Just be genuine.
Yeah.
It takes a real fan and somebody with clout, because the studio is going to fight you the whole fucking way if you're like, I want capes and stuff like that, which
Yeah.
they were just like, no, black leather all the time. That's all there is. And they're like, no, like Captain America's costume works now. And
Yeah.
that was not obvious to anyone for like 50 years.
Mm.
And then they cracked it, right? Chance of Shinar can't be translated. It's unique to its medium, which I think is kind of special in a way.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I think that's a great recommendation. It sounds like a Duolingo roguelike edition. You are learning language as you go up. Amazing. All right, one book outside of Geek Club.
Let's see if I have it here. I can just provide visual. I would say, just like what I said about like when thinking about what my favorite thing is, it's like how could like it's something that can't be translated into really another medium.
Mm-hmm.
There is. I want to give two recommendations so bad because one is fun and one is not. But God damn it, I have to say
it's your own conscious. I'm okay with it. It's whether you're okay
yeah,
with it
yeah,
yourself.
I love rules. I make them for a living. Structure and systems are really amazing to me. So when somebody presents a game to me, I want to play the game as it is written,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just like slavish to that thing. But I'm gonna say Asterios Polyp,
Okay.
which is a very strange Greek word, and it's about a architect that was only ever an intellectual,
Mm-hmm.
and he has a mental breakdown, and the book is like him really reflecting on his life and where he went wrong, in that he'd only ever pursued the intellectual side. He's an architect that's never built a building.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how that really messes with him, and that is an interesting thing. But it's the visual storytelling of the book. Like every page, every layout is telling stories that are only really ever exclusive to the medium of comic books.
Mm-hmm.
Comic books have a language, a very specific language, and Asterios Polyp pushes that language to the limit in every single spread. It's a magnum opus. It's a real work of art. Yeah. The other one I would say, for those of you who don't like Woody Allen movies and aren't pretentious like I can be, because I love shit too. Like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I do, like not equally. Some stuff is
It's got
cinema
its
and some
place,
stuff is
right? Yeah.
just a great movie. But on that front, East of West.
Oh yeah.
Do you read comics at all?
Not as much as I should. I'm very picky. Like I picked out things like I read all of the Walking Dead comics, for example,
Oh, cool.
and like the Sin City stuff and some of the Frank Miller stuff. If it catches enough of my attention, I'll go for it, but not as a general reader. No.
Jonathan Hickman is a really really big inspiration for me art wise. He's a designer that is also a writer. He's a better writer and a better designer than me. I feel like I'll get there at some point in time. I've carved out my own thing, but I'm just fascinated with that dude. By the way, artist writer is a very strange, like dual skill set. I've
Mm,
developed very strange skill sets
yeah.
that only attract people that I want to work with, which is fascinating. But
Yeah.
East of West hits all of these. It's incredible world building and design of the character, but also it's like a really cool western.
Mm,
At the end of the day, it's like badass. It's kind of futuristic western. There is an apocalypse going on. The four horsemen of apocalypse are rolling around, and you are following Death,
oh, okay.
who has weirdly chosen life. So it's the three other horsemen that are trying to get their boy back effectively.
Ah, okay. Amazing.
So in the last apocalypse, like all four of them were on game, and then Death fell in love, the very scary woman, like as only death should
Yeah, of
have,
course. Yeah.
and he turned his back on his role, and so and killed the other three horsemen, and now they have returned, and it's this like it's death and with his kid and his love of his wife, and it's just, but it's the sci-fi world is friggin' fascinating. I haven't even scratched the surface of this premise.
It sounds like a little bit like John Marston running away from his past, right? He's settled down and he's got his kid and his farm, but he's still got these boogeymen from a previous life that are coming after him.
Yes, all of that stuff is in there. Yeah, for sure.
Very cool. No, thank you. It's really, really good. What did I say next? Oh yeah, movie next.
Network.
I've never seen it, but I know the "I'm as mad as hell" speech,
Yeah,
of course. But yeah. I'm not. Yeah, exactly. I'm not exactly saying anything unique there. Why Network? Sell it to me.
It's a movie from the 70s that predicts everything that is currently in this culture and has been for like that. Paddy Chayefsky, the writer, he just predicted all of it. He predicted the news culture. And the premise it starts off with, which I don't know if it was happening at the time, but a corporation was about to buy a news network, and which is all too common now.
Yeah.
But he's like, this will unravel everything, and here is why. And the whole show like plays out the unraveling of what happens when news is taken over by corporations, basically. And he nails all of it, and I watch it every couple of years, and every couple of years I'm like, it's still relevant. How is that fucking possible?
Okay, I need to watch that. And to be honest, it's criminal I haven't watched it already anyway, to be honest, because it's obviously iconic. But I didn't realize that's what it was about. Obviously I just heard the quote and I knew it was a well thought of film, but I wasn't quite sure what it was about.
That scene is amazing, but that isn't even his best rants.
Oh, really?
There's like a series of them where he breaks down society and the ills and problems of it, and there's not a single scrap of wasted dialogue. Every scene is extremely important. Every character is interesting. It fires on. It's funny, like watching this newsman go crazy and his prophetic visions and everything. It's just when I remember the first time I watched it, I go, not only is that now my favorite movie, that probably will always be my favorite movie. It just hit me.
Yeah. Mine's Ghostbusters, so it's not as cool.
Ghostbusters is amazing. It's absolutely up there. No disrespect. I hate to keep coming up with pretentious shit, because I love fucking comedy and I love all that stuff. But if you have to like drill down a one thing, you know what I mean? It's like got to be the thing with like that impact.
Yeah, no, and to be honest, I guess it's kind of like a playful thing for me because of that exact thing. Lots of people can't wait to tell you that their favorite film is some Oscar winning, like, I don't know, The King's Speech or something like that, and so they kind of seem like someone who's a cinephile, right? But I always like to just kind of buck the trend and go, no, actually, like,
it's contrarianism.
Yeah, there's nothing better than Ghostbusters, to be honest. It's just got such a special place in my heart.
So good. It's so good.
It is, and this is the thing. Like, if you point to like everybody likes to remark on how nothing but remakes and original ideas anymore. That's what I really like about Ghostbusters is you can point to it and go, if you want an example of just how original the ideas were back then, Ghostbusters is really, really good. Really, really good.
And the fact that script was like 1,000,000 pages and Dan Aykroyd, and it was serious. And if you listen to Dan Aykroyd talk now, he can't shut up about aliens and the supernatural. I think he was raised in like a house where, and everything. Like he, on some level, does think that on some dimension somewhere, the Gozerian is a real 100%. Fucking thing.
Yeah.
Just to keep on that real quick, like I'm I would say if I had a role, it's world building. It's my favorite thing to do. It's what I want to do. If I wake up every day if I can carve out my career to just sit down and conceptualize worlds and build them out in all of its infinitum and then pass it on to somebody and make really good money, that's what I would absolutely do. The world building in Ghostbusters, because I like, at the time you read it, you'll hear something
Mm-hmm.
about a book reference and you're like, I want that book.
Yeah.
And like that is the thing I absolutely strive for, these sticky little things to put in games and movies and whatever project I'm working on that sets your imagination on fire. And
Mm.
that movie sets my imagination on fire over and over and over because they reference things that aren't real and don't exist, but you want them to be.
Yeah. Yeah. He's got the book, hasn't he? That they reference to kind of look up where Gozer came from and things. I can't remember what the name of the book is, but yeah. Yeah. So apparently Dan Aykroyd was massive. To coin a term is probably not fair, but conspiracy theorist and
Oh,
occult interest before, and I think he wrote Ghostbusters came as a result of that passion, right? And he
yep.
wanted to kind of communicate it. Yeah, really, and I love that he like. Have you seen the sequel, the more recent films?
Oh no.
So in Afterlife, he's basically just like an old man working in Ray's occult store, and that's what he does now. It's great. That's great.
Perfect. Yeah.
All right, musician, band, artist. What kind of music do you
So
like, Josh?
I'm a big hip hop fan.
Okay.
Big time. But there's a very specific sector of music. So I hate it. Like, so I grew up in the 90s
Mm-hmm.
when what we would now consider like the absolute pinnacle of hip hop.
Yeah.
Um, and I was really big into Nirvana and the Pixies, and like I'm that's when my brain started really cooking, was punk.
Yeah.
And the idea of a guy that's just saying a bunch of things behind an instrument he's not playing, like, just seems so like ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
And I was going through my second stint of college. I was never good at school, so I'm at it again because I think I need it. And I meet this guy, and he's listening to my music, and man, I got to be honest, like, your music doesn't represent you. You're not a punk rock guy. You're a big dork. Like, you like anime, you like comics, you like movies, you like all of these things. He's like, have you ever listened to Deltron 3030?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I'm like, no. And he's like, okay. Well, I think at first he brought up Wu Tang,
Yeah.
and Wu Tang was a little advanced for me still, even though it's very obvious and logical. But he brought up Deltron 3030, and I listened to it. And Deltron 3030 is it is a concept album with these two guys, the producer Dan the Automator, who would go on to make the Gorillas
Oh,
later on.
really? Okay.
Yeah. He was always like a concept producer. And this guy Del the Funky Homo Sapien, and they got together, and Del was like a weird guy. I think he's Ice Cube's cousin. Yeah, he is. He's Ice Cube's cousin, and Ice Cube was like, "Yo, you should come with us." And he's like, "That's not my vibe." Seems a nerdy dude. And so they get together and they make a concept album about the year 3030, and Del is Del Zero, and he's a mech pilot, and the whole album is so conceptually off the rails. And it is exactly my vibe. But I didn't realize that 90s rap was just the new punk rock.
Yeah. Pretty much. It was. It's obviously very famous that NWA were pretty much like riding on an anti-establishment message, right? Like "fuck
Yep.
the police" was
Yeah.
literally it, right? And they weren't, because obviously like the gangster rap side of things was regularly accused of just being probably from a discriminatory point of view. These black kids are just rapping about shooting people and dealing drugs
Right.
and all the rest of it, right? But actually, that's not what they were saying at all. In the same way that Rage Against the Machine are massively misunderstood by like half of their audience because they don't realize that underneath the really cool rhythm and rock guitars, there's actually a message there which probably doesn't resonate with a lot of their fan base, because they how many people are getting drunk and listening to the lyrics deeply, right? And I do think there's this weird like surface level love for the music, which is fine. I don't see any harm in it. But yeah, it's interesting that they were really championing a political message, if you can call it that, about the state of the world that they were living in. So I mean, I'd never heard of the Deltron 3030 concert out. It sounds absolutely incredible. I love stuff like that. Were you a fan? Were you a fan of Inside by Bo Burnham?
Yes. Yeah.
See, now
that's random.
Yeah, and I was just thinking of like albums as a concept. Basically, Inside is an album, right? It's a collection of his music, which to a genius level he created all kinds of like amazing, imagery and stuff around it. But yeah, that kind of stuff really.
So you're in the UK. Are you familiar with the Streets?
Do you know what? When you said hip hop, I was going to say, do you know the Streets? Because
Grand Don't Come for Free is also like a genius concept album. I picked it up, and I remember, and it's the time of CDs, or when I still had CDs, and so you had to kind of listen. I'm going through the tracks, and first one's like weird, but whatever. The second one's fine. The third one kind of like locks in, but by the third one, I go, wait a minute, he just mentioned that person in the first song. Is that the same thing? And just, I was like, okay. And I got home, and I remember listening to the other half of the album, like in my driveway. I'm like, I'm locked into this, and I was locked into the story of it. And it just like, holy shit. Okay.
Yeah. Even my dad, who, he's like, 71 this year. He's always been really, he loves his music, right? So he's not dismissive. He's not like one of these old guys that says you listen to the Beatles and nothing else. He really likes and appreciates new music, and he's a huge fan of A Grand Don't Come for Free. Because of that, he said, he's never known storytelling across an album like it, and he absolutely loves it. Yeah, great chat. That I could talk music forever, to be honest, because
I think it's magical, and I use it. It's a tool in my case. Like, it helps me be creative.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I love how music can be a time capsule as well. Like if you listen to something that you were a big fan of when you were like, I don't know, 12, 13 or something like that, and you ever get that feeling where you can smell the same smells and you can like just feel like you're there, right? I love that music can transport you to a time in your life.
Absolutely.
So last one, TV show.
Again, I want to shout out, because it's a recommendation, like Hidden Gems. There is a show that Amazon put out. So when Amazon was first doing their original content, they had a pilot program, and they made like 4 of them, and the 4 are whatever. But there's one called Patriot.
Okay.
You familiar with it?
No, never heard of it.
It's really, really special to me. Like, Succession is special to me. Sopranos is special to me. Fargo is special to me. Like, there's all these. The Wire is really special to me. These are no disrespect to them, but people generally know those shows. Like, for some reason, I feel like Patriot belongs in this pantheon. It's 2 seasons. It's about espionage, which is a genre, like a subgenre that I do dig.
Yeah,
I do really like a good, slow, fucking, like espionage thing. But the guy that created it, I'm blanking on his name, Conrad, something Conrad, is a really odd dude, and he wanted to make like a spy show. Clearly, he was like, hey, Amazon was like going to big creatives, being like, do you want to make a show? And I don't know if it was like, hey, we're looking for an espionage show or whatever. He's not really a guy you would associate with espionage. And so he said he watched a shit ton of espionage, and after a while he just started kind of making jokes. He's like, it's kind of a funny medium. And so it's about this guy who's pretending to be John Lakeman, and he is being an analyst, and he has to get very good at his job, which is garbage. It's just bureaucratic bullshit. They sell like wing nuts for things, but he needs access to this so that he can go to Luxembourg
Mm-hmm.
with an alias, like confidently, and do a task. His father is the head of the state, and CIA. He's like a CIA director or intelligence director of some sort.
Yeah.
And he has lost a ton of money, and he looks like an asshole, and he doesn't want to take credit for it, and he doesn't want it to go out on the radar, so he sends his son to retrieve this money, and it just keeps punishing him. Like one problem because one problem because a murder happens in Luxembourg, and Luxembourg has no murders and hasn't had murders in a while. So this one incident kind of rings out, and this detective just starts following him. But it's this just series of compiling problems. But the overarching thing is like a dad that just keeps pushing you, and is unaware of just how much it's like it's straining because he's a coward.
Yeah.
It's so good, and it's funny, and it's shot beautifully. It's a 10 to me, and it's shocking that nobody ever sees this.
Yeah, it's when I pulled it up on Google. I don't recognize the branding of it, the guy in it, anything like that. It's so definitely under the category of hidden gem. And I do just want to point out, I'm glad you mentioned The Wire, because I still think that's like
that is the network of television shows.
Yeah.
It's that procedure of how you get a window into how a thing works, and then you just see the world differently as a result of it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, amazing. Really, really good stuff. So we definitely got to know you, Josh. That's for sure. So I want to talk a little bit about work now. You've touched on it a little bit already. So I dug into your link tree. I was obviously familiar with the design work you did around some of the Pale and Disco Elysium, but I noticed that System Shock and Mistborn were in there. You'd done a few bits and pieces on that, and I'm curious. So when did you first kind of start getting artistic inclination in the way that you have now? Like, you've got a very rich history with video games and movies. I'm just wondering when you first picked up a brush or a pen.
So I was always wanted to be an artist, but I was always really afraid of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I now very much understand my psychology throughout my 20s in retrospect.
Yeah.
I just told everybody I was really lazy. I was too lazy to do things. But then I looked at all the other stuff I did, and I was like, I was never lazy. So what is it? What's the resistance that I'm forming? And I was just like, oh, I was afraid to be vulnerable. I was afraid to express myself in those ways, and so I sabotaged myself endlessly. I spent my 20s like kind of wasting them, and I think I started out okay, and then I just got worse and worse and worse until I wound up as a police dispatcher, which is about the worst job that any human being could ever have.
I am definitely going to ask more about that, because that's cool.
Sure. It's police dispatching is rock bottom. It is a you're just listening to people cry and scream for 8 hours for help. That's all it is, all day, every day. And I'm sure being a cop is worse, being a nurse is worse, being all those things. But on top of that, it also pays nothing.
Yeah.
As a result. So you just have to endure hours and hours and hours of people's worst day.
Yeah.
And then you got to deal with cops, and they can suck because they have to deal with those people in person, and there's just no good aspect of this job, like, whatsoever.
Yeah, it's so funny little story actually, and why it immediately piqued my interest. So when I was about 19, 20, something like that, I was moving back from London to my hometown where I am now, and was looking for jobs, and there was one was emergency services operator, basically, is what we would call it here. And I got up to a phone interview, and the lady on the phone was asking me, general interview questions, and she just said to me, you realize the severity of the calls that you're going to be dealing with, right? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'm prepared for that. And then she said, okay, I'm going to give you an example of a call that we had recently. And it was, and by the way, it's about to get dark for anyone listening, because she was deliberately testing me, right? She said we had a call from a father who was distraught because he had his children tied up in the basement and was going to set the whole house on fire. What do you say? And I was silent for about 5 seconds. She went, I'm really sorry, I haven't got a job. And I've never been more happy to be rejected from a job application in my entire life, because I think you just kind of have this naivety about it, right? Like, there's a kind of cool mystique to being exposed to the stuff that people don't see that police deal with, right? Because most of the time it's isolated to those incidents. And then when someone actually just puts it in front of you and goes, well, actually, you're going to have to deal with this kind of thing all of the time, it's a real... I immediately woke up from how, scary and dangerous a job that would be for my mental health. So I don't know how you did it, but...
So it's funny. I mean, like, dealing with people that are about to commit suicide, because everything is recorded, so you can like listen back to it and stuff. And they got a guy, and he called, and he's like, "Hey, is this officer on duty?" And I'm like, "No, he's not." And he goes, "Can you please get him? I'm on a bridge. I'm about to jump off." And then I just go into like, all right, how can we, how can we facilitate this? I'm like banging on the wall, basically trying to get a police officer in there and write things down while I'm like being very congenial and interesting and everything like that. But listening back to it, like when you go back to it to try to figure out the location and everything, the guy goes, "Hey, so I'm on a bridge and I'm about to kill myself," and I go, "Hey." Like, just like the dumbest fucking response. Hey, so what's going on? Like,
crazy weather we're having, right?
The mode of me that isn't like a professional person and just like a human being, but that was my instinct to like shoot out when he's like, "I'm gonna kill myself." Hey,
it's a very disco. Like, it's a very Disco Elysium response, at least, I suppose. It's quite fitting with the. God. Yeah, wow, yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, sorry. We kind of derailed there. Yeah. So
I did that for 2 years. I was just like, I just kept digging a deeper and deeper hole in my life on what I wanted to do and avoiding it and everything like that. Had a friend of mine that I went to film school with, who called me up and he goes, "Hey, I'm going to do bomb disposal for a living. It's a certification. It costs $8,000. And I'm like, I have $14 in my bank account, man. No one will lend me money. I'm in the end stage. I'm digging a deeper and deeper hole here and everything." And he's like, "Well, good luck with that shit." I'm like, "All right, cool." So Hurricane Ivan hit. I'm in Pensacola, Florida, and it's one of the largest hurricanes to ever hit landfall. And it comes in and it destroys everything, and including everything I had.
Wow.
Which was like all of it. Like my apartment's gone.
Yeah.
So so FEMA comes in and I go to my boss and I go, "I literally have nothing to do. I have nowhere to go. I have only the clothes on my back. How many hours can I work?" And he goes, "Well, FEMA comes in, so you can work 20 hours a week." And I go, or 20 hours a day. I go, "Done." Yeah. So I worked 20-hour days. I slept 4 hours in the broom closet of the police station. I start off at City Hall, but then City Hall opens up and they're like, "You can't be sleeping here anymore." I'm like, "Okay." Yeah. And then I went to the police department and I did that for an entire month. And then I had the money and then I went and got the certification. And then I did bomb disposal for 10 years.
Amazing.
So before, but like about 2 years into bomb disposal, I had a come to Jesus moment. I always told myself, if I had more time, if I had more money, if I had more resources, I would be an artist. But I don't have those things, so I can't do that, and I can't be that.
Yeah.
And then I remember like a year and a half in, like I just stacked money. I had no bills. I had nothing. I was living in hotels, making amazing money on per diem, racking up shit tons of money. So I had a big pile of money because I wasn't spending anything.
Yeah.
And I was playing a video game and I I went to the bathroom and I came back, and I don't know if I was the right level of drunk or whatever the case may be, but I was just looking at the controller and I'm like, I'm a fucking liar.
Wow.
And I set the controller down and I started writing. I was like, I'm gonna write a fucking script. This is gonna happen.
Wow.
And 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 I was so wired to just play video games, to not be connected, to not be artistic and everything. I wrote a minimum of an hour every day for an entire year. And bomb disposal is really taxing. It's 10-hour days. You're oftentimes just moving massive ordnance around. You know, you're
Mm.
just pumping it up and down mountains and all over the place and stuff, like you're digging massive holes. It's really taxing. And every day I was like, nope, go home, write for an hour. Um, I did that every day for a year to break a kind of cycle in me. And then just to be sure that old me never came back, I did it again for another year.
Hmm.
And I wrote terrible scripts. They're all objectively terrible. I turned one into a comic book. I worked with an artist, and me and the artist had a lot of conflict. And I realized I'm not going to be able to make anything if I don't learn how to draw.
Hmm.
So I quit my very well paying job and I
Wow.
left a lot of money on the table to go back to community college in my 30s and taking Art 101 classes, which is hilarious because like I'm a 32-year-old man surrounded by 19-year-olds who don't want anything to do. They don't care. This is an elective to them. They're staring into space.
Yeah.
And I am taking it more seriously than anything I'd ever taken. And my teachers loved me. They were like, oh my God, thank you. Finally, somebody that gives a shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine. That's honestly, it's really inspiring stuff. You know, like these little and it's interesting to describe them as like come to Jesus moments, but yeah, it's weird how these light bulbs just go off above our heads at the most strange times. Exactly the same thing. Well, not exactly the same thing. That would be ridiculous. But very similar thing happened with doing a Disco Elysium YouTube channel. I don't like. I was when I first started doing this, I was literally doing what every first timer on YouTube does and goes, "Oh, well, I'm playing games anyway, so I'll just record it." No one fucking wants to see that. Like, nobody's interested. And then I can't remember exactly what it was or the circumstances, but I was just like, this would be way better if it was just Disco Elysium all the time. And then, you know, because I had the right amount of passion and interest in it. And yeah, it's weird. Our brain can be helpful at times.
There's a phenomena that happens. So I talk to I do like lectures at the university here in New Mexico.
Hmm.
And the thing I try to like really bring to people's attention is this idea that I because they're, you know, like a couple years in to film and art and stuff like that. And I go, you guys are currently in the imitation phase. And that's a really important phase. There's no knocking that. You are looking at these artists or these filmmakers or things, and you are just emulating them. As a byproduct of the 90s, going through film school, Pulp Fiction was the shit, still is, by the way.
Yep.
And every single screenplay was a Tarantino ripoff, and they were
Mm.
all terrible. Like even mine, which also is the case. So I try to tell them that, and I'm like, but eventually you got to find your voice. And like for you, just saying that, like your voice is Disco Elysium. You realized, uh, you go into this phase where you want to be popular or you want to be successful, and everybody does this. They just think
Yep.
it's the thing, and then eventually, and in the right time,
Yep.
they go, they find their voice, and
Mm.
then they're them all of a sudden, and then they realize other people like them for them.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's a really enlightening experience, and you hit the nail on the head. Absolutely nail on the head. Um. So you obviously you've touched a little bit on, you know, you kind of had this moment and you decided, no, I'm going to pursue writing and I'm going to, you know, be an artist and stop, you know, suffocating my desire to do those creative things. Where was it always kind of with the vision of getting into game development, or did that kind of come as a product of what you were doing? How did that end up shaking out?
When I realized it was going to be more than a hobby, because I kept telling myself again, resistance lies. I kept telling myself like just to like, like I might not make it. So, I'm just doing this for fun. I tell
Yeah.
everybody that's the hobby. I just want to really, really get into my hobby. And then when it became kind of more of a professional thing, I'm like, all right, well, I'm never going to be poor again. That sucked.
Yeah.
Poor for most of my life kind of thing. So what is the most lucrative, like, way to tell stories? And then I looked at like films and I'm like, how do I enter into films? Is it like screenplay writing? Well, there's literally a million screenplays out there. So how do you separate yourself from the market? Like how do you kind of do that? So I just knew, I was like, video games is such a lucrative sector for what I think I can contribute to, like, storytelling specifically. I've read comics, you know what I mean? Like, I at this stage of my career, I know enough people, and it would be interesting enough to be like, I kind of like to do some like narrative design for movies. I just try it, like, and
Mm.
I'd love that now. But I have a good resume, and I have cool stuff on it, so I think I can venture into that. But at the time, it was just like, I just don't want to be poor.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get it. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, it's a huge motivator for all of us, right? None of us really
Yep.
want to be in that position. So,
I
um,
mean, 18-year-old punk rock me is kicking myself in the balls right now for selling out, but I feel like I've made it work. Like,
yeah.
honestly.
Look, it's like it's that is, I mean, slightly different meaning, but the Joyce Messier line in Disco Elysium, I don't know if you remember it. It's something along the lines of, even those who seek to critique capital only end up reinforcing it. And I always think it's like, I get fighting capitalism, right? And I get having problems with the capitalist world we live in, but it is the world we live in, and to deny it is to deny there are lots of nice things about capitalism, right? You can't tell me that these hardcore communist socialists who are so anti-capitalism don't enjoy the fact that they can order a Karl Marx book and get it the next day, right?
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful articulation.
Yeah,
Yes.
so, that's kind of, you kind of have to accept it, and I think most people do, right? But you can still critique it.
Yeah.
Um, so your current role, and we talked a little bit about it, the fact that you're working for a hero of yours, Ken Levine. So your role is writer and designer, and you pointed out that that's quite an interesting combination of talents. So just tell us a little bit about what your specific role is at Ghost Story. Is that what they're called? Sorry, yeah,
Yep.
Ghost Story
Yeah.
Games.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you up to there? What's your responsibilities?
So, I was coming off of, um, uh, whatchamacallit. I'd hit a point where I was like, shit, I really need to kind of think about a job. I thought I was going to have a bigger role in Night Dive, and it didn't seem to be panning out that way.
Mm-hmm.
After doing this, all the bunch of System Shock design and creating the manual for System Shock
Yeah.
and everything. And I was like, I'm going to try to put myself out there and see what's out there. And I added Ken Levine on Twitter to something. I listened to a podcast with him, and he had said that he's on Twitter more than he likes. And I
Mm.
was like, gotcha.
Yeah.
So I took a bunch of spread pages um, from my System Shock manual that were, I mean, complete and utter homages to Ken Levine, and also illustrated the way kind of my brain thought. And I put them out on Twitter, and the next day I had an email from his personal assistant that's like, Ken wants to talk to you. I was like, that's amazing. First of all, I called all my friends and I go, if this is you, I'm gonna fucking murder you. But it wasn't. It was Ken, and we had a really long talk, and he said he has a mechanic in mind, um, and he doesn't know how to really mature it, and everybody on his team is working on something else. So we talked for about an hour and a half, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to do this?" The reason why I'm being kind of coy, when he sat down to tell me about Judas, he said, he goes, don't don't tell anybody this. He goes, yes, we trust you because you have an NDA and all that other stuff, but just don't ruin it for people.
Yeah.
And I was like, like, I feel very similarly. I think storytelling is magical, and I don't want to ruin the story for anybody. Unfortunately, the thing I am doing, the mechanic very specifically that I am working on, is part of that.
Okay.
And so I cannot divulge it. One, he will absolutely fire me. And that sucks. But honestly, the bigger one is disappointing. Is disappointing that man, and all that is my biggest motivation in that.
Yeah.
To be honest, so unfortunately, I can't tell you what it is, but I have been working on it for a year and a half.
No, fair enough. And to be honest, Josh, I really didn't expect people, especially with Judas being like a fairly limited announcement so far. There hasn't been much shared on it, right? And I did think it would be difficult for you to go into too much, but
Sure.
I appreciate you sharing what you did. And it's interesting you talk about like, so obviously I spoke to Argo this weekend about like Disco Elysium in general, and tried to get as much out of him about the future and what were the fate of different characters and stuff. And he was like, I could tell you, it's not like NDA. It's not because I'm worried about someone coming in and suing me or whatever. It's because I don't want to ruin what I think is going to one day be told. And and I'm grateful for that, because I'm going to play whatever comes out from the ashes of Disco Elysium. I'm absolutely going to play Judas, and I would be ruining my own enjoyment, right, if I was just like sucking all of this spoilery information out. So yeah, it's completely understandable.
There's so much that you will be surprised by, even if you watch any of the marketing now into to its release. It will surprise the shit out of you and everybody else, like for sure.
No,
So
good.
much in there,
Tell us a little
and it's
bit.
all brilliant.
Yeah, well, I fully expect it will, because of the team behind it, right? To just tell us, can you tell us a little bit about what it's like? Because a lot of people will be listening to this, and your envious position of working for Ken Levine, a guy who is, as you rightly point out, one of the few rock star game developers, right? So just tell us what the experience is like working with someone like that.
So when I first started, like my first week, so up until this point, because I didn't become an artist until my 30s.
Mm-hmm.
um I have a really strong opinion, and I I may not be able to convey it as effectively. I'll be learning that to articulate what's in my head, but I do have a pretty like mature sense in my skull, right?
Yeah.
Um, and when I deliver something, the usual response is, "This is amazing," or "We're not interested." So I thought in my first week, when he's like, "I want you to figure this out and come back a week from now," and I come back and he's like, "No." And this
Mm.
happened like 4 times. And then he would further articulate, and I would go back and he's like, "Do it again." And I was like, the first week I'm like, I can't believe I'm talking to my creative hero. And then I'm like, I can't believe I'm being eviscerated by my creative hero. um he is challenging. I think there's a lot of what people say about Ken Levine, and I think a lot of it is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he is not an asshole. He absolutely is not. I think if you asked him, he might even say he's an asshole. But I've interacted with that guy in pitch meetings and in innumerable meetings with Ken Levine. He's not a bully. He's not an asshole. And anybody who just thinks that based on a Reddit post or whatever, like, you got to understand these are people, and you don't know them.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know who they are. So
Yeah.
I know Ken, like, personally. I really want to stress that, because that guy gets a lot of bad rap.
That's right. Yeah, he does. Yeah.
What he is trying to make something worthy.
Mm.
And that is going to take as long as it needs to take. or as long as Take-Two will let us,
Yeah,
will
yeah,
pay us
yeah,
to make the thing that he wants to make. But he's trying to make something beautiful and worthy and timeless, and I think that is worthy of his of Bioshock and Bioshock Infinite and the things that he's really, really, really proud of. And he's just not going to accept anything that is subpar. And he is fortunate enough to be a guy who has the clout to be able to keep doing that.
yeah,
And so it's hard working for somebody that is constantly like telling you no. Like it's painful.
yeah,
It's deeply painful. I got to go out and eat ice cream like a basic bitch after each meeting and like reflect and then take a and then go to sleep and then wake up supercharged and like ready to appeal to them. But like great art takes a lot of fucking time and a lot of mess ups and sometimes a lot of yelling. He's never yelled at me, but
yeah,
you get what I'm saying. Like
yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and I've heard it echoed across various people in those environments, right? And especially when we're talking about people who have really like specific visions, and I love visionaries like that. And there is, as you say, there's an acceptance. Like you kind of, there's always going to be like this tough back and forth, right? Because it's really hard without telepathy to completely convey everything that you see it as. But eventually, he obviously trusts you enough. I mean,
yeah,
he kept you around, right? All those no's. He understands that
yeah.
it takes that back and forth.
And also Ken touches every aspect of the game.
Mm,
He touches every aspect of it. I've now worked in two studios really like to a pretty far extent, right? And you not oftentimes do game directors touch everything. They just
mm,
defer to like other departments and stuff like that. Ken is extremely hands-on, um, and really, really, and his questions are aggressively probing.
yeah.
Why did you think that? What was your motivation for doing that? And so you have to go into those meetings knowing why you did everything that you did, and also the questions that you don't anticipate him to ask about the larger projects and your place in it. And
Mm,
it's just again, it's really brutal. But I don't think that there's anybody. I think Ken is literally the best at like dramatic moments in video games.
mm,
I play a lot of video games and I see a lot of cinematics that happen in games and events that happens in games. And in Judas, there are moments where I'm like, God, he nailed it. And I'm in a writer's room watching it come to being, and he proposes some kind of dramatic event, and it doesn't feel like it fits anywhere in the scene.
mm.
And then and I'm sure I'm not alone when I'm like, God damn it, this is gonna be like, how do we get from here to where he's clearly gets really excited about, and how do we do it? Everybody figures it out, and when you see it play out and you watch it, like you're like, God, he's good at that.
Mhm.
Every one of them is like you can feel it. You feel the drama. He's a drama guy.
Yeah.
His dramatic beats are unstoppable.
No, I love it. No, it's amazing insight. Thanks for that, Josh. It's like, yeah, not often we get to hear about the inner workings of a studio with that kind of person in it. So I really appreciate it.
Fucking
Um,
scared to do it sometimes because I feel like he's standing right behind me.
yeah.
He's gonna fire me at any moment. I again really don't want to give up anything on any of these games and stuff. And he's a private dude too, and I don't want to give away too much, but I have nothing but admiration and respect for that guy, even though he's my boss and all the other stuff. Like
Yeah.
there'll be. I don't think I'll ever get the chance to work with anybody on his level probably ever again, like his level very specifically.
Yeah. Yeah. Is the game in general just and again, don't obviously say anything that you're not allowed
Sure.
to or is not available, but just what's it going for? I've seen the trailer. It's it's one of those teasery type ones, right? It looks mechanically very similar to, well, it looks like BioShock Infinite in some way. So, how far away would you say personally the concept of Judas is from something like BioShock Infinite? How much of that DNA is shared?
I It's unfortunate as this game is coming out, that Ken is going to take a lot of shit for this being BioShock kind of thing. But I can honestly say, you know, the BioShock mechanism, the first person shooter aspect of it, where you have a left hand power and you have a gun in your right hand.
Yep.
The thing about, there are certain things about Ken's process, and it all kind of leads to this, which is like how, like, he wants to tell a story, and he needs a vessel in which to, a delivery system for that story.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to pull the left trigger, which is connected to your left hand, that then creates the power, and being able to click the right trigger, which signals the right hand like gun that's in there, is just the most simplistic way to, of like combat, to get you to these story beats and to the, you know, to kind of convey it. He's just so streamlined in it. So of course he would eventually come up with a combat system that is similar to all the other ones. It's unfortunate, I think, that people are going to be like, oh, it's just a BioShock ripoff. First of all, don't you want that?
Well, yeah,
Don't
I've
you
got no
want
problem with it
like,
at all.
the fact that it's a criticism kind of irks me. Like, I get it, I understand, but at the same time, I'm like, don't you want BioShock 3? If you do think that it's another, if it's just, they call it like, people online were saying like they were calling it like Space Shock or something, something to that effect, and it's like, but they're saying it like it's a negative thing. Again, I can't give you any kind of information. I will just say that Judas is very, very, very different. From those games. It's just unfortunate in the, you know, the mechanic that he finds to be the most advantageous, useful way to do it.
But it's a signature as well, right? And it's an immediate call sign for those people. I mean, we could probably talk about what the reactionary nature of gamers TM is these days, but yeah, I think, you know, the vast majority of people are fairly sensible and will kind of go, okay, at least I know, I'm confident now. I know for a fact it's a Ken Levine thing, because, you know, all of that stuff, those little trademarks. I
mean, it started with System Shock 2 as well. Like System Shock 2,
of course,
you know, the you know, the UI and the interface is very similar to that, and he cut his, you know, he made his bones over there and just connecting it over. To him, it's just, it seems like just the easiest way for combat and the most dynamic. And I agree, by the way.
I love I love that mechanic, and it's how I always play Skyrim as well. Believe it or not, I'll always have a destruction spell in the left hand and a one-handed sword in the right. I'm not a stealth archer. I don't get the obsession with stealth archer, right? I've never done it, but that's another tangent for another day, I think, Josh. So people will obviously be listening to this with some interest because of your involvement with Studio ZAUM, and some of the artwork that you did for them. And I just really want to go right back to how you first got involved with ZAUM, and you know, when that relationship first began.
Right. So kind of in the same way, I was really, so I limited my work in bomb disposal locally to here for 3 months at a time, so I could dedicate the rest of the year to kind of like moving into the career of art and, you know, in writing, right? And so my wife at the time, you know, was paying half the bills on everything. I have a house, you know, like all, you know, everything's going on. Well, we get a divorce at the beginning of COVID, and I realized that all of my bills were about to double, and that the way, the path that I was on to get to the career that I wanted to get to was about to be in like serious jeopardy. Talk about that fear thing again. I thought I had kind of like pushed past all my resistances, and I was making my portfolio and putting it together, and I was like, it's just not good enough yet. It's just not good enough. I need to keep tweaking it. I need more stuff. I need to keep doing stuff. And I realized when that happened I was like, okay, two things. I can go back on the road, or I can take the portfolio that I have right now and I can just send it to everyone.
Yeah.
And including a bunch of jobs I would never want to do. Like the fear for me is winding up with a mobile game dev offering me way too much money to do like UI.
Yeah.
Like, because my skills could very easily have gone down that direction at any point in time, and it's even more lucrative and stuff. And so I was like, fuck it, I'm sending it out to everybody. And I swear to God, of the 50 some odd, ZAUM was the only one that reached out.
Wow, really?
That is what I realized. Like, yeah, I'm like, okay, my art, which you cannot explain to your aunt at Christmas,
Yeah.
it resonates with very specific people. It resonated with Ken Levine, resonated with ZAUM. You know what I mean? Like it hits certain notes for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Just got that frequency. So they reached out and I was like, I can't believe this. Like, because I had just heard about Disco. It was out.
Yeah.
I'd seen it and I was like, this looks really cool. I'll get to this eventually. So they hit me up and everything, and they basically explained, I hope I'm not divulging anything, any kind of secret or anything, but they were like, we didn't have a designer when we were making this game.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of logos, there's not a lot of stuff like that. And he's like, so we would like you to make the book of it, and then we want you to put a bunch of design in there, and we're just going to pretend like we always had it.
Yeah.
Basically, he said Disco was created on the back of bar napkins. We don't really have a lot.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, what do you want to do? And he goes, we're going to pay you X amount of money. We want you to just play the game and just figure it out. And I was like, what a nice, rad.
Yeah, that's quite a nice little license to go off and do your thing, right?
Sure. It's great in some ways, bad.
Yeah.
The other side of that is, but then like I couldn't get a hold of him for a while. I don't know what was going on. It's COVID time. It was like early COVID time. So it was like kind of a mess.
Yeah.
Had a hard time getting back to him. Oh, I met Rustov, like my one kind of entry through. So I can't remember who my handler was, who my original guy was. He's an illustrator, good dude. I'll figure it out. But he was like, yeah, you need to meet the team. So he brings Rustov on, and Rustov, who English is not quite where, like it's not
perfect.
Yeah. But he was basically like, tell me about art. And I was like, we already seen your work. We already know you're capable of doing whatever you're capable of doing. We want to know about you and how you feel about art. And I was like, oh man, I have been waiting for this. So as you can tell, I'm pretty good at articulating like how I feel about art. So I did that, and they were like, all right, cool, hired. So they paid me a bunch of money, and then I kind of lost track of them and wasn't able to get anybody like in email. And then eventually they showed up and they go, so I don't think we're going to do the book thing anymore or whatever. And I was like, do you want the money back? And they're like, no. Just make a bunch of cool shit still and just send it to us every now and again, and we'll go over it and everything like that. I was like, okay. So, because I really needed that money, like in that moment. So good for them. I mean, they're like, you've met enough of the team know to know that is what they would do. They wouldn't take the money back for me as an artist.
No,
like they're just not that vibe.
Yeah,
like they're absolutely. Like, figure it out kind of stuff. Which is why when you hit me up, I go, I gotta let you know, man. Like I wasn't like partying with the team, or I wasn't, like originally on the team. I'm very ancillary to the team, kind of stuff. I don't want to misrepresent myself in my role in that. So, and you were like, oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah, we had Volya Kapitanava on, who was a community manager, and she had very similar concerns, right? Because, and I said the same thing to you as I said to her. It's like, no, don't worry. A loose connection is just absolutely fine with me, and I'm really like, apart from like the actual ZAUM people I speak to, like Argo and Martin Luiga is a very different type of podcast, right? Because you can talk like endlessly just about disco, whereas these people like yourself who've had involvement with it, I'm really fascinated by a lot of the outside stuff that you guys do, and which is why I have had the questions that we've had. No, it's really like, who do you remember who it was who first reached out to you? I guess it was just like
I'll after this I'll hunt it down and I'll text you, because I don't know where he is. He's a great dude, but he's really the only my one interface with.
Yeah. All right. Fair enough. So, I mean, the art book exists now, right? There's a digital and a page. So it was still you. How did it come back around as a thing?
Oh, I didn't touch it at that point.
Okay.
For 4 months, I just delivered shit tons of design. I have no idea what happened to any of it.
Wow.
I didn't know I have not. There's a couple little like YouTube documentaries that people have tried to compile together to talk about that era. Of the studio that I was into, and I've always been afraid that it would be too salacious, and because I know what the inside of studios look like, and people that have never worked in game studios, like, they don't know what they're talking about. It's a very unique environment, and you can talk about it, you can hear stories about it all day, but until you're in a writer's room, or until you're like on the Slack channel and going through stuff and stuff like that, anything that you see or read in game journalism, like that's not a complete picture of it. So when I see stuff like that, I get a little leery. I'm like, do I really want to, like, because I'm gonna have to believe everything they say, because I don't know what it is. But there was an implosion there, and I don't know if I was, like on the outside of an implosion happening that I was unaware of.
That's interesting. Okay. So, but one of the things that did, it's on your portfolio is the pale stuff, right? And my understanding is you were kind of given like a bit of, well, I mean, it sounds like you were given a lot of creative freedom anyway, but so to tell us how that came about, because there was some really fascinating stuff here. Like I've got it up in front of me now. You've got like a section on the swallow, and for the YouTube, I'll have to put it in a post, right? There's like this incredible steampunky design about inhalation and exhalation for the pale mechanics. There's like tools, or well, what they are is like little icons. It's like cold plasma torch temporarily destabilizes the atomic structure of the pale upon incision. There's anodic frequency, which expands and sustains the gap in the pale, allowing for safer passage. A plasma logo, and like I really love this, the Pale Worker Union logo. The light purifies, the rhythm absolves, the pale no more. I mean, there are another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tiles of equal detail, but I'll just stop it there for now, and we'll reflect on some of that stuff.
Right. So again, because I had zero supervision, and I basically just pass all my work for every couple weeks like into a fucking slot, and then it goes somewhere off into the universe. And sometimes I would get notes, and sometimes they were just like, we approved this on like immediately, or this is trash. We're not going to use that, like, no, we're not going to use this. So I never really know what they used or what they weren't going to use or anything like that. Also, a lot of these designs were supposed to go into the clothing line. The way that they pitched me was, they were like, we don't want to be a game studio. We want to be a studio, an art collective, and games is one of the things that we do.
Got you.
So I knew about the jackets and everything, and my greatest regret is that I did not stick around long enough to get a jacket, which they're
worth quite a lot of money, aren't they?
Like, regardless of the money, just to have it, like, that would have been, I rarely do I get stuff from studios. Like I just got like a giant box set for System Shock and everything, and very the controller I'm using is like a 1 of 12.
Oh,
I love
cool.
that shit. I'm a big nerd, man. So
Yeah.
I believe I didn't get that jacket anyway. So yeah, a lot of that design stuff was meant to be patches, and it was meant to be like kind of secretly put into place as slots that were supposed to that you could take in and out, that were like really well crafted and stuff like that, which is why everything kind of has a shape to it, and like it's all condensed form.
Yeah.
But that guy came to me, and keep in mind that stuff you're seeing now is like the 20th thing I came up with, because you play the game and you take a shit ton of notes and you're like, ooh, I could do something here.
Yeah.
And all the first stuff that you do is all the most superficial. It's like postcards and stuff that translates easy from my skill sets onto paper.
Yeah.
But like I said, world building is my jam.
Yeah.
So I kind of thought, like, well, what if I was an anthropologist and I was living in this world and I came across the Pale, or I came across those things, like how, as a anthropologist that's researching this, how would my theories play out if I was in that world? Eventually, that's kind of where my idea went. And so the idea of the 2 millimeter hole, like
the hole in the world,
that is seen as kind of ground zero for like the Pale.
Yeah.
I just imagined, and this is a lot of my work, is this just machinery that's sitting behind this thing, like just this epically crazy mechanism machine. I always saw Pale as being exhaust from something somewhere. It's just that the smokestack is 2 millimeters, like wide, right? Kind of where that comes from. So that's where a lot of those ideas came from. The big one, the one that really caught on, I felt really bad about, honestly, because I hit up the studio. I go, hey, I'm looking for another job. Can I start posting this stuff? Because again, it just shot off into space. Like, and I don't want to release this stuff without anybody's approval or opinion. And so I was like, hey, can I put these pages on my portfolio so I can get another job? Obviously, them being artists and them being awesome are like, oh, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And then there's that one page with the Magpies, which we can talk about, that caught fire, like, on Reddit. And I don't know how I came across it or what happened or whatever, but I went to it and I was like, and my first response was like, oh shit. So I sent it to ZAUM, and the subject in the email was whoops, because people like really went off on it, and it really like wove into the thing. And I'm like, no, like, here's the thing. I don't know if they read that and were like, yes, this is exactly what we're thinking. Notice it says the theory of entropics, right? Like,
of course,
it is a theory. This is how I kind of pitched it. But honestly, it's my theory.
Well,
based on,
it's really taken a life of its own now, hasn't it? Like it's become such a thing that I even asked both Martin Luiga and Argo about it. So I remember Martin was like, I don't know what you're talking about. He was like, magpies. I was like, yeah, is Harry a magpie? Does he interact? Like, can he influence the Pale? Like, you know what I'm talking about? And he's like, well, Harry is like a sort of special being, but he was really lost on the term magpie, which is, it's really funny now. I hear the backstory to it.
I kind of love it, man. I love that I slipped a page. And also, I do not want to. I don't want to be a vandal.
Yeah.
I want to be a Banksy. You know what I mean? Like, I like that it slipped in, and I think they're okay with it. I think they would be okay with it. What did Martin say?
Martin was pretty confused about it. Argo, and he kind of said, well, yeah, Martin was like, Harry does seem to have some effect on the world, but he didn't expand too much. But speaking to Argo just generally about the way that interpretations have come about from especially the Pale, he was a huge fan of it, because I pointed out that there's the long-standing theory that the Pale is a metaphor for climate change, and I asked him that, and he was like, no, we never thought about it that way. But he likes it. He was like, well, no, absolutely, we love that that is an interpretation of it. The Pale, so it's like third hand at this point. So I have to like clarify. Argo said that he had to. He caveated it with, that's how I remember Robert explaining to me, and now I'm Chinese whispering it to you. It's basically the representation of a person's connection with the story. So Elysium is a world that is aware that it's fictional. And if you imagine like never-ending story, while he's reading the book, it's happening. And while he's not, nothing's going on. And if you imagine the Pale as the ever-increasing loss of memory of that time or that world, or a decreasing interest in the world, that's what is consuming the fictional world it exists in.
That's amazing. So the theory of entronics is actually a theory I have. Like, very specifically, I think this is real.
Mm-hmm.
I think that at some point in time in the future, there is a singularity, and
Mm-hmm.
something is sending information back and is literally pulling the present into the future. Give you an example. Like, I've always said stuff similar to this, but when I became an artist, and I distinctively remember the way my brain was before being an artist and the way it was after an artist, and I could swear to you that as I started working on my craft and I started getting better, I could feel an antenna growing out of my head that was now receiving information that it wasn't receiving before.
Yeah.
And then I started kind of coming with this idea, and I always think about Steve Jobs created the iPhone.
Yep.
Because he loved Star Trek and he wanted to create a tricorder. He didn't know how to do that. In fact, when he announced that he was going to do it, the engineers didn't know how to do that.
Yep.
But Gene Roddenberry created it in the 60s. And it's like, how the, like that, it's that thing that's fascinating. When a writer wants to accomplish something and creates a piece of technology that does not exist anywhere in the world, and eventually it finds its way to a guy that is like, I'm gonna rip this into reality. I'm going to take novelty and I'm going to pull it out of something and I'm going to bring it into the world in the most aggressive fashion possible. And I truly believe that that is what's happening. I think that artists, or magpies, and the term magpie is because they like shiny things, and I always associate novelty with shininess. It's like, ooh, you know, like the way
of course.
they go to it, and that there are people that are just receptive to this frequency from somewhere in time that is trying to pull us there.
I absolutely love that, and it's interesting you say like I love what the podcast does, and I really preferred it pre-COVID. But Joe Rogan, divisive figure, of course, but he really shines when he gets to talk to someone like Brian Cox, or like some sort of physicist or like scientist, because then you see the childlike joy come out of Joe Rogan, which is probably his curiosity there is where it's really good. And he talks about human beings and like its purpose as part of nature. Bees make honey, right? Everybody knows that. Cows generate milk. I mean, not for us originally, but they do, right? That's when you think, what does a cow do? They do that. Their contribution to the wider ecosystem. And then you go, well, what do the human beings do? Because we are this weird little self-conscious, aware, sentient species, that a very unique version of life on Earth. And he's got like this really nice way of summarizing the fact that we just build and create technology, and we're never satisfied, right? We didn't get to the iPhone and go, well, that's it, we've cracked phones. We iterate and we iterate, and we just never stop creating advancements in technology, no matter how small or big. And I really love this idea. Like he talks about a singularity. He's like, how long is it until we eventually, as a species, we evolve into, we like technology has gone so far now that the line between us and the thing that we were creating is gone. And that's when you're talking like Blade Runner stuff, right? And I love the idea that there are these people amongst us as a species. Like, your theory is amazing, and it completely like resonates with the way I see it as well. Is like, yeah, you do have these strange phenomena of people that just seem to be driving this kind of progress forward. It's really fascinating theory.
And they're all fucking weirdos.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
every one of them.
yeah,
Like
they're all
I
alien,
like
right?
you mentioned Joe Rogan. Like I love listening to challenging, controversial people that I don't believe in. When I started bomb disposal, like I was a very pretty devout lefty,
Mm.
and I got surrounded by people that were far right my entire career, and there hits an inflection point where you're like, if I keep pushing these guys, they're just going to punch me in the face and I'm not going to have a job anymore. So I need to listen.
Mm.
And the more I listened, the more I was like, okay, I don't agree with you, but I really see where you're coming from. And I do understand why you have so many fucking guns or why you're, do this. And I
Yeah.
really pushed me into this like central place, but I will never like, that was so informative that, when just getting the full spectrum of people, and I started to really, really love listening to people I didn't agree with. Um, it takes a while. It's hard to hear challenging things,
100%. Yeah.
especially things you don't agree with. Like I can listen to things and I can absorb them and I can see their perspective without agreeing with them. But it also checks my shit where I'm like, wait a minute, you know, how many how many people that were deathly opposed to guns went into COVID being like, I should get a gun. Like I heard this over and over and over again. Or I'm like, oh, now that it's
Mm.
now that you're in danger, you have a completely different philosophy. How about that?
Yeah, it's
Um,
interesting. Mm.
without them ever feeling like, well, so I have another thing. I actually have another God, I have this another diagram that I've been working on for 5 or 6 years on ego specifically because I love making infographics like those.
Yeah.
Like it's literally the inside of my brain. That shit you're seeing right there, that's how my brain
Yeah.
operates. It's now a one-to-one. I create those things. It's like um on ego, which is um the story you tell yourself about yourself. I
Mm.
got up with this guy reached out to me again, fan of disco stuff, and he's like, um I am a professor of psychology, um, and we write these things about people, and we write it for each other. And they're these 120-page things that nobody's ever going to read but us, but other academics, and it just stays locked in. He's
Mm.
like, can I help you research anything that you want to research, that you want to work on? And I was like, ego. I'm fascinated with ego. And that's the first thing he told me. He's like, it's the story you tell yourself about yourself.
Mm.
And I use that concept constantly as a result. It isn't, people associate ego with vanity, which is a part of it.
Yeah.
Oh, he's so egotistical. What they mean is that person has so much vain. They think so highly of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But behind my eyes, I have ideas, and then the world has ideas. And then the world tries to push these ideas through my eyeballs into the wall that is my ideas.
Mm.
And I have to decide whether I want to let those in or whether I want to go, no, I'm just going to keep believing what I believe.
Yeah.
And it can really mess you up.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating, and it's interesting. You're right about the challenge of people being willing to listen, because I've been on a similar journey. Like, I think age does a lot to help with it. Having children, all of the stuff that's designed to mature people as human beings. Like, I was so Jeremy Corbyn, socialist Labour Party leader here. I was like so far left that I voted for him twice at one point in my younger days. Is like, I don't know, 10 years ago, something like that, over a period of the last 10 years. And I was really, really, really hard left. And I found myself becoming more. I'm still a lefty. I think that a lot of my things are, very left thinking. But I have warmed to the idea of listening and trying to understand why people may think a certain way. And obviously, I'm not an American citizen, but nobody on earth ignores the US presidential election. And I'm not going
Sorry
to
about that.
yeah, I'm not going to get too much into what I think it could mean, but one thing I thought was really clear was that the left and the democratic view was one that was really unhelpful in trying to win that battle, and it was so dismissive of everybody who was voting the other way, right, or
Right.
had some sort of belief in the other way. And do you know, people really don't respond well to being called stupid or having their opinions completely dismissed. I can't remember what the numbers were, but there's like over 50 million people or something like that that voted for the Republican Party to win the presidential election. And are you telling me all 51 million of those people are utter, like, the bottom of the barrel morons? I just don't.
Right.
So I was like, you haven't bothered to listen to anybody, and quite frankly, you probably deserve, as a result, to not share in any of the fruits of that. That was my observation,
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. I Yes, I agree with all of that. I'm obsessed, to go back to the pages and everything in correlation to this, is like I am obsessed with systems
Mm.
and the rules in which those systems lie. I create fictional systems that, they have their own interesting rule sets to me and how the world exists within those systems. So I devour politics, I devour economics, I devour it's all raw material to me,
Yeah.
like all of it. But I have a weird way of sitting outside of it. I
Mm.
know there are people around me that are very passionate and very emotional about those things. And I agree. I understand why they are, but at the same time, I'm like completely removed emotionally from all of it. Because I'm like, how's that gonna play out?
Mm.
What's it gonna be like being you know, with the country that is effectively um, tech oligarchs have completely taken
Yeah.
over politics, and how is that going to evolve and everything? I don't know if it's bad. I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's going to affect me. I don't know if it's going to affect other people. I'm sad if it affects people poorly, but in the outside of it, I'm like, that's a cool story.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
this
It's
is
fascinating, isn't it? Politics, I think, is.
utterly, unbelievably fascinating when you separate yourself from it.
Yeah, and I think that's something I've realised recently. Like, being associated so much now with Disco Elysium, people really do expect me to be hard left. Like, and I'm really sorry to, like, break the break the illusion now. I'm just not, and I'm probably I'm way closer to how you view that kind of stuff. Right, I do have my passions and I do have my beliefs, but I think,
So
yeah, I'm really fascinated by the story. I think is what it's fair to say. I'm a news whore, basically.
I listened to three main political podcasts. So Pod Save America for my like left leaning, and
Hmm.
then Breaking Points for my like what I think is about as even keel analysis
Hmm.
as you can get. I don't want news. I want analysis. I
Yeah,
want people that have a very good perspective. So Pod Save America, which is very left leaning, those guys worked in the Obama White House. I'm not expecting them to give me honest impressions of the left party. I don't care about that. I want you to take me through the process
mm,
of what you did in that administration and how you handled foreign affair issues and things like that, because you people actually have done it.
yeah,
Again, it goes back to the studio thing where I'm like, I'm not interested in anybody's like outside perspective, when it comes to like deep analysis or real opinions,
yeah,
that matter. And then center is Breaking Points, which I think is brilliant. Shout out to Breaking Points. Which I think is probably the best kind of even keel analysis. And then the Dispatch, which is my right leaning
okay,
podcast, that is, and again, it's all people that have worked in administrations that have been in the sphere of politics. So it isn't so much opinions as it is analysis. It isn't so much that as it is like people that know what they're talking about, which is why I love Disco Elysium, because I got to be honest, I am a capitalist and I do have neoliberal tendencies and, and stuff like that. And I think communism is very scary to me into my lifestyle and everything else. But I respect the shit out of their opinion. I want you to pitch it to me. And from a political perspective, like, man, disco is so ballsy.
Yeah, absolutely.
That game could only be done by people in Estonia that have no overlords like whatsoever.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
every studio in the world would run the fuck away from this as quickly as possible. Everything in this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So glad we got it. It was lightning in a bottle, right? Really was. We could talk about Disco Elysium now, believe it or not. Which is crazy. We're just about to hit 2 hours. So, and we're just getting into. You weren't lying when you said you were a conversational rascal on the.
Oh my god. Yeah, I'm a Gabby.
But it's absolutely brilliant. I love it. This is such a big reason why I did it, because I could just talk about this stuff forever, man. It's great.
With purpose, right? Like, it isn't enough for us to just bullshit. We gotta monetize it. We gotta,
exactly. Of course, yeah, absolutely.
100%.
So we're gonna just I've got like a bunch of cool Disco Elysium questions about your experience with the game and everything else. So you're gonna have to cast your mind back a little bit now. So, like, the first question you kind of already answered. You'd sort of heard about Disco Elysium, right? And were pushed towards playing it as a result of the relationship you had with ZAUM. So, what was, when you finally got round to it, what were your initial impressions? And like, do you remember a particular moment where it kind of clicked for you or anything like that?
Yeah, keep in mind, I mean, I was playing it to analyze it. And so that's a slightly different play style approach of any kind whatsoever. What was the moment that like really really like pulled me in? I think it's, first of all, it's a very intriguing premise. It is a murder mystery, although that is kind of obfuscated by the environment in the world in which you're kind of raptured in. And you go, oh, this isn't so much about the murder mystery as it is about like how this city was ravaged by all these different political systems. And you're learning the stories and stuff like that. And there's just an amount of grounded realism to these people. Last time I was in Europe, it's the first time I saw a certain level of homelessness. I was in Dublin. No, not Dublin. Berlin. Jesus,
Berlin.
I am sick. I'm a little cloudy.
It's got lid at the end, so I'll let you off.
Yeah. But I was in Berlin, and I did see, like, homelessness in America has a very specific look to it, but I think it's different in Europe. And I saw people walking around with plastic bags, like going in and getting recycled material in like bottles and stuff like that, putting it in. I was like, oh, I thought it was this bygone thing.
Yeah.
There's such a fingerprint of Europe to Americans, particularly. If you haven't stayed there for any prolonged period of time, you don't understand it, especially the Eastern Central side of it. Has a very rich, unique history. I've been to Ukraine twice. Like, you get there and you go, oh, I understand disco a little better now.
Yeah.
It's the personalities and things like that. So it was just really getting into a culture that I wasn't entirely familiar with, that I wanted to know more about. And it gave me that. Like, we talked about The Wire and like Baltimore. I feel like I know Baltimore.
I did a video recently. I called it A Tale of Two Cities, and it was basically an analysis of how I'm bigging myself up big time here, 'cause I'm very proud of it, to be honest. But I viewed The Wire and Disco Elysium as kind of going for the same thing for different. Basically, they are. You can interpret Disco Elysium in many ways, but one of them is that actually it's about the world, right? And that's exactly what The Wire does. The Wire presents it, and it's the parallels are really fascinating, because like The Wire is a cop show that was supposed to completely subvert what people expect of cop shows, and what The Wire is actually about is a city called Baltimore. And I always found that really similar to Disco Elysium. You go into it thinking, well, it's about this, about that, but actually it's about the world it's based. It's about Martinez, Revachol, and the surrounding areas. So yeah, really, really good comparison. So which character resonated with you the most?
Does anyone not say Kim?
Quite a few people. Only one person said Kim, and most people deliberately avoid Kim because they don't want to give a boring answer. So it's
That
like,
sucks. I had to be honest then, because to be even more honest, I did think that and was like, let me come up with a cool one
the
that's like
cooler one, yeah.
I did, but I still settle on Kim. I have a thing for second in commands.
Mm,
I feel like a shitty way of saying this would be sidekicks. Sidekicks is so demeaning as
yeah,
like kind of character, but it has a purpose. Again, I'm a big comic book nerd, so I get the idea of it. I guess a sidekick would be a ward of a hero. A second in command would be the like number two of a villain.
mm, yeah.
Um, Top Goon, whatever the thing,
His right hand
arch
man.
henchman.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
whatever that thing is. But I have always, I don't know if it started with James Bond because James
Mm,
Bond movies as a child are very insanely cartoonish, but there
yeah.
was always like the villain second in command always had like a wild theme to them, and it
Bit
really,
like
from a design perspective, really stood out to me.
Odd Job with the hat that he
Yeah.
throws. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or Jaws or any of those.
Yeah.
They're outlandish, but I've always been like, man, why aren't there more movies about second in commands?
Mm,
And so I think I have a very special place in my heart for that. I also seen myself as a second in command. It's easier for me to be able to whisper in somebody's ear. Like I'm not somebody that I'm very closed off.
yeah.
I come across as an extrovert, but I spend 80% of my time introverted.
Mm,
But that 20%, I'm Gabby, as we
yeah,
said.
yeah.
Like I have a lot to say because I've been thinking about it for 80% of
Yes,
my
of
time.
course. Yeah, of course.
But Kim being a silent secondary character to this buffoon, and it's such a brilliant dynamic. It's one you might have seen before, like Inspector Clouseau, right? Pink Panther
Of course, yeah.
movies. You know what I mean? Anytime you have a like, I think Shot in the Dark has like a secondary silent character to Clouseau that's just like handing him implements, like handing him props in which he will just fumble and
Yeah,
destroy,
yeah.
hurt other people in the process with them. But he's always just like, mm-hmm. Kim is the brilliant version of that. There's a there's the gun sight scene moment, which I think is maybe one of the best like mechanics in a game, because you've been rolling dice
Hmm.
for things that are not terribly consequential
Yeah,
until that moment. It takes you 75% through the game, which is tens of hours, to get to a point where you're like, oh my God, I have to roll good now.
yeah.
And it shows you just how important that character was to me as I was playing it. I was like, I don't think I can handle this if I miss.
Yeah, and you've got like the whole list of things that you've done, good or bad, to affect your relationship, and it's like this culmination of the journey you've been on together. It's like, well, you remember that thing you did at the beginning, albeit accidentally, maybe. Well, now you've got a -1 because Kim did not approve of that, and I love that. And it's like you're faced with the consequences of your actions, and now it's like, wow, now it really matters, and you're absolutely nail on the head. Yeah, it's a brilliant moment, and there are, like, people always say, I save scummed it, there was no way I was missing that check, etc., right? Because people have so much care for Kim.
Yeah. And I mean that again, at the end of the day, I don't think there's any other character that you can do that to. It's funny you mentioned that, because I was thinking about like the whole measure head thing, right? And it's like, as somebody playing a video game, you just want to get past that guy.
Yeah.
So you're willing to say almost anything
Yeah,
to get
yeah,
past it. Like Disco absolutely um, makes you understand yourself a little bit better if you really get into it, and it will call you on your bullshit when you do.
Yep.
Especially the, you know, like the things you're saying to get through or to get something somewhere. It's like, it's not worth offending this guy behind that's standing behind me.
Mm-hmm.
It's just enduring it, you know?
Yep.
He's like, do you want my opinion or do you want to just go on with our jobs? Because that's what we're doing here. I'm not here for, you know what I mean? You're like, it makes it so much more tragic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I like the whole Measurehead thing. It's one that gets talked about quite a bit because he's like he's the dragon before the cave where the big boss is, right? And like it's presented as such a like a huge barrier to get into this docks, and there doesn't seem to be many other ways. And then bang, racist, off you go.
Yeah.
Go and study this advanced race theory, and depending on your position, you know, in that context, you'll either be absolutely mortified that you've now got to kind of go down this path, or you'll love it. So it's really fascinating.
But I mean, I shoot people in games all the time
Mm,
to get places. You know
yeah,
what I mean? To the point where I'm not even thinking about it.
yep, yep,
You
and
know,
it,
and but this coming out of my mouth or making these choices, like again, especially in relation to what you're saying about like my favorite character, it's like I don't think there's any of those other characters that quite affected me the way that Kim did because it called me on my bullshit. It
yeah,
checked me.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, is there a particular? There's obviously lots of subplots that people resonate with. Is there any one subplot in the game that really stuck out to you and resonated with you as well?
The high net worth individual that couldn't be perceived by light is so clever. I think I don't know if it's on that page, but I did do like a diagram for this.
You
I
did
got
actually. Let
utterly
me see if
fascinated by it.
I'll pull it up. Is it on this one? I don't think it's on this particular one, but I know that you did do a. It's the Weissman coefficient, right?
Yeah.
Let me see if I can pull it up. It's a mouthful. No, I got. I mean, I'd probably if I had the time and the will, I could probably find it. But it's
Sure.
basically if it didn't come up on the first Google, it was it was never going to be
Yeah.
found. But yeah, go on. Tell us about your love for that.
Yeah. Have you watched Succession?
No, it's on my list because I know that the creators behind that are the same people who created a TV sitcom here called Peep Show.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's
yeah.
Brian Armstrong. He's a genius. But it is very much HBO wanted to have a conversation about disparity in wealth,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know how Brian Armstrong coming off of Peep Show was the guy, or he was kind of pitching the Rupert Murdoch story, but done in kind of a fictitious way. But it is all about high net worth individuals, and the brilliance of it is that it is a comedy.
Yeah.
It's so dramatic in so many ways, but you can't take these fucking people seriously because high net worth individuals, especially when they're born into it, are just in this bizarre egg and they're
Mm,
surrounded, you know what I mean? Like their theories about the world make no fucking sense. And they shape a lot of reality
yeah.
in the process of it. So yeah, him just breaking down like how he operates within the world and everything. I think you also find out because he's like, you can't see me because you're a low net worth individual, and et cetera, et
That's right.
cetera. And Kim can see him, which makes this other implication of like, you know, there's a lot of implied about Kim, you know,
Yes.
that kind of comes out in miscellaneous ways. And because he's a guarded person, which is really hard to fucking write, by the way,
Mm,
that's so hard to in a video game to create, you know, a person that is extremely closed off and still you want to lean in. Tell me
mm,
more, you know.
yeah.
You start kind of fishing it, but yeah, that whole little weird thing that, you know, when you open the door and stuff, it breaks reality. Like
Yeah.
the it's not, you know, there's so much grounded in that game,
Yeah.
and this is just straight up magic
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's science, but you know what I mean. It's science to the point of magic,
Yeah.
basically.
No, it's incredible. Did you ever get around to doing the political vision quest, the ultra liberal political vision quest?
I probably did, but I'm drawing a blank on it.
You can
She's
eventually.
on the boat, right? And you go, and she's like,
Yeah, but it's more centered around the light bending guy and Cindy the Skull. You go and get some like shitty piece of wood that you eventually sneeze on, and is just like all that Cindy's done is like drop the brush on it or something like that. She wasn't trying; it was just completely accidental. And you then take it to the mega rich light bending guy, and you can convince him it's a worthy investment. And what happens, he says, look, I don't have any money on me now, but I can give you shares. And it fires up, like your net worth goes up into the millions. And then you can go on this whole thing, like you get Idiot Doom Spiral as your brand manager, and then you can go. You go to Bird's Nest Roy, and he's got a lampshade for sale for 700 real, which most people you can't buy. I think you can, but it's very difficult to get 700 real in the game. But then you can go and offer shares, and it's all about like this bullshit. Oh yeah, but these shares will make you like your net worth will now be like you're thinking about money in the wrong way, man. Like don't think about cash in your hand. Your net worth is what matters, and that's how you kind of end up. You sort of convince Roy to give it up, and yeah, it's just a really fascinating way of looking at capitalism in the real world.
yeah. Well, because again, high net worth individuals transcend capitalism.
Mm.
Like they're
Yeah,
beyond
yeah,
that.
that's true. Yeah, you're
They're
right.
not thinking about money in their pockets. You know what
Mm.
I mean? Like it's a thing. Do you know who David Cho is?
Yeah, does he do podcast? Is it the same?
I think he has in the past. Yeah.
Yeah, I know who you're on about. Yeah.
He is what happens when a really prolific, brilliant artist becomes extraordinarily wealthy overnight.
Mm.
And he should be studied by he's studying himself constantly. Like everything that he does is always this like examination of why he is as batshit crazy as he is. And he absolutely is. He's engaged in every form of debauchery humanly possible. He's gone everywhere. He's taken every drug. And now for the past probably 5-6 years, he's in complete kind of retrospective of his life. He's fascinating dude. But yeah, he is certainly what happens when
I just pulled him up. He's been on Rogan, right?
probably, yeah.
I'm sure he's been. Yeah. His stories and his openness about telling his stories. And you're right, he is absolutely batshit. And if anyone has not shown an interest in him, they absolutely should, because yeah, as you rightly point out, super fascinating person, very very
It's
interesting.
it's important because high net worth individuals are hyper analytical people. They're people in finance. They're people in they hire people like David Cho to make things for them.
Mm.
So it's fascinating when David Cho becomes a high net worth individual, and then you get to
Yeah,
see like how that unravels.
yeah. He's had his battles as well, hasn't he? I
Yeah,
understand.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
He's amazing.
big time. Yeah, very interesting guy.
To the point of like, was it worth it?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I always think. You remember the Titanic submarine trip
mhm.
where they all
Yeah.
where it imploded? The thing about that is that, like, to your point, these people that are so wealthy that there is no jeopardy in their daily lives, right? So like every single problem that they face almost certainly can be solved by their bank account, right? And they go about life like not even thinking about the worries and things that we regular people do. And I was always like, yeah, that's what happens when you are so fucking bored and have such little jeopardy in your life. You go pay some dude like $1 million to go in a tin can controlled by a $20 Logitech controller. I was like, the only people doing that are billionaires, because if that opportunity was presented to me, even for free, as someone who is regularly dealing with jeopardy and understands risk because I deal with it all the time, I was like, like everybody looked at that news story and was like, what the fuck were they thinking? Like, you looked at it and was like, what? Yeah.
I'm glad you're saying this because people really need to understand. This is something I in my explanation of Donald Trump, you know, and other high net worth individuals like Elon Musk and other weirdo, controversial kind of people and stuff. When you start talking about money, you're already wrong. You've already missed the motivating narrative. It's number go up.
Yeah.
It's money has been so abstracted to certain people that they don't care about the denomination.
Yeah.
They don't care what the denomination means. What is money? Who cares? You know what I mean? They just want number to go up, and they will do anything or sacrifice anything to keep number go up. Like, full stop.
Yeah, really, really good way of putting it. That has to be the case, right? Because people always ask, like, "Oh God, you know, how much money is enough?" And you're right. Well,
doesn't matter. That's inconsequential. See, again, you're already missing the motivation of the person. You're not really digging into who like Elon Musk is, or who Peter Thiel is, or who Donald Trump is. Like, you're completely missing the point of them if you start using normal fucking terms like money.
Yeah, really, interesting. Very interesting way of looking at it. So reorienting myself a little bit. Was there a moment like there's I'll give you a famous example, of course, like I want to have fuck with you when you fail the suggestion check with Classio in the middle. But was there anything that like kind of took you out and like really surprised you and made you laugh, or kind of a jaw-dropping moment, anything like that, where you kind of went, wow, during the game?
I'm just going to assume that spoilers are off the table. I want to recommend this podcast. It's people that are in my life that have never played Disco are going to listen to this, and so it concerns me that there is a spoiler. But I will say the last person you talk to, the deserter, his talk about what happened to Robichelle from his perspective made me cry. It really messed me up. Again, I don't cry easy. I do get emotional. I get emotional by beautiful things more than I do from sad things. Like I can't watch Into the Spider-Verse without tearing up because it's just so beautiful and insane, right? And I feel that way about a lot of like art, or I'm just like really taken by it. But his description about the mask of capitalism falling off and the black magic and just that speech just really fucking got its claws in me.
Yeah, it only has to take the mask off for a second to do the deed, or something like that. I think it is.
Oh, that is such. I mean, and by the way, this is in an ocean of also amazing writing.
Yeah,
but this to me really stands out. And realizing, fuck it, we will just talk about it. We'll just spoil it.
Yeah, go for it.
Viewing the world, and I don't know if this is interpreted or not. You may have a different impression on this, but he goes crazy, the deserter, and he is connecting with the world through a sniper rifle. And he thought he had a cause, and then he ended up killing somebody for the wrong reason. And it made the situation worse. But it was the violation of a girl that he was attracted to.
Yeah.
It had nothing, in my opinion, it had nothing to do with politics at the end of the day. It had nothing to do with all the bullshit he was saying. He just liked a girl.
Agreed.
And he didn't want to see her treated that way.
Yeah.
And like it's as human as it gets.
Yeah.
That really messed me up.
Yeah. No, and I'm glad you said it, because I think only one guest in the past has really made a point about that. A lot of people talk about the working class woman, and the revelation that the phasmid was real, right? But I think the deserter, like I remember I did video for it, obviously for the channel. It goes on for like about 2 hours conversation with the deserter, and there's all of this incredible analysis of the world that we're in, capitalism, what communism means to people like him, etc. And it's just so beautiful. But yeah, that particular speech you're talking about with a mask of capital, and it's just, I had it pulled up recently actually, because obviously doing social media stuff. But yeah, it's a brilliant. And people are critical of the ending, right? They're like, oh well, it wasn't. I didn't get to go and arrest Ruby or Titus and things like that. Some people found it dissatisfying. I'm like, were we playing the same game? Like,
yeah, I arrest people in other games. Like it does, I
yeah,
fight people in other games. Like go play Baldur's Gate 3. There's plenty of
yeah.
that. This is kind of a unique slice, And yeah,
There's a lot of points that get missed in Disco Elysium, because it's weird, right? Because like it became popular, and a lot of people, if you go onto Metacritic, for example, and go, oh, what's the best PC game on Metacritic, which a lot of people do to find games to play, at the top of that list, you'll find Disco Elysium, right? And then there's that like fringe interest that comes in, and a lot of people, like Reddit is full of people like, what am I playing here? And it's like, well, I always say, if you haven't clicked with if it hasn't, if you don't get it after that opening speech from your brain, where it's like where you realise that you're going to be playing the game within like someone's mind, I honestly believe if it doesn't click, then you're gonna have a really hard time getting it to click further in. People have, but I always think you kind of you miss the concept entirely if you if that doesn't click.
agreed.
Where did I get to there? What were your thoughts on the skill system, Josh? Particularly interested as someone who was analysing this when they were playing through, like the thought cabinet and the way that the skill system was chiming in and how it's presented. What did you think of that on your first impressions?
Incredible. And on top of that, like it takes, I mean, you have role-playing games where you play with other party members and you interface with those people. It is not obvious to put all of them into one person's head, especially somebody that's kind of a junkie and has done his shit together and everything.
Yeah.
That's just not obvious, and it's shocking to me, and I can't imagine how much they expanded the scope of the game. A little insight into game studios is that what typically brings them down is mechanic creep. You're working on it and you go, we need this whole other thing. Well, building a mechanic costs a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of energy, and it detracts away from milestones that you're trying to get to a release date at a certain time.
Yep.
And it just never fails. You need a bunch of producers standing around like smacking their hand going, how much is this going to cost? How much is this going to take? How much is that, to keep them in line? So again, disco doesn't happen in a normal studio because some producer would come down and be like, what? No, like we can't add millions of words to this additionally and add this skill system and then this and like the thought cabinet, and it's so thoughtful.
Yeah.
Pardon the pun. But it is just so, it's trying to craft somebody's mind.
Yeah.
And motivations and how they see the world and everything. And it does it in such a perfect, unbelievable way that just isn't in any other game, because those games are trying to be marketable, and they're trying to, and they have a budget, and like no disrespect to any of those games, but like you pitch this to a studio, they're like, this is amazing. It's like, did you see Jodorowsky's Dune?
No.
Oh man, Jodorowsky's Dune is one of the most amazing documentaries of all time. Jodorowsky is this crazy person, and he wants to make Dune, the book,
right? Okay,
which by the way he hadn't read. He just, when somebody told him about it, and he's like, I want to make this book, and it's fucking massive, but he clearly hasn't read any of it, and then he just wants to make his own story based on what somebody told him about Dune. It gets crazier and crazier and crazier, and he goes all over the world, and he gets Orson Welles to be Duke Harkonnen. He convinces him. He
Wow.
convinces the entire Rolling Stones to be members. He starts training his son because only his son can be Paul Atreides. Does all of this stuff before ever consulting a studio. And then he goes to the studio and he's like, here's my amazing thing. And they're like, how long is this? And he's like, who cares? They're like, we care.
Yeah.
And yeah, he gets Salvador Dali to play the Emperor.
What the hell? This sounds amazing.
Oh, it's beyond amazing. I don't want to ruin any more to it, but it is this thing where the scope is so insane that like no studio would touch it. So again, once again, one of the many things that makes Disco really amazing. And again, as somebody who pitches games to studios and brings them stuff like, man, that mechanic's got to be tight when you're going in there before you get a couple million,
Yeah.
and investor money to make a thing. So, man,
It's funny you say that because Argo was
so punk rock, man.
Yeah, Argo was saying actually that the big problem after Disco Elysium 1 was that they wanted to put in like I think it was like 60% of the dialogue was read by through a standard playthrough, and they wanted to have this extra 40% just in case, like as stuff that you could discover, and they were like, what, like you want to put like another 40% of text that most people are never going to see, and it's going to, no fucking way, not a chance. And that was and that's the thing, and as you rightly point out, Disco happens because there's a willingness and a kind of okayness to, yeah, actually that matters. You need to have that stuff because it fleshes out the world in ways that you won't even realize when you come to Inception, right? And as it was proven in Disco, it really does do that.
I think if there's any form of art that really expresses the idea that people are very complicated, like it's this game, and having like it isn't just the skill set mechanic, it's the amount of skills that are at your disposal, of like the amount of like demons, we'll just call them, that Rostov painted, that you interact with. It's just so much.
Yeah.
And it's not, you're like, and again, as somebody who plays games, I'm like, there is a part of me that's always going, how will this get me the biggest number to go up? How will this get me the most coin or the most points to be able to see the most things in the game or whatever? I'm constantly struggling with this. And at some point in time, I'm like, I just want to see cool things happen. You like let that part go, like you were saying, where it's just like, I'm not going to be able to beat this guy up.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to put all my points into pageantry or encyclopedia because I just want to know more about the world. Like the game broke me.
Yeah.
As a gamer.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like you mentioned the encyclopedia, I always find it really fascinating. Like, I don't know whether it was on. I should have asked actually. I don't know if it was a deliberate thing, but like, I think a lot of players go into Disco Elysium knowing you're going to be a detective, so you generally put points into intellect, right, and those kinds of things, and then by same, and by pure accident there. That's where encyclopedia is, and you're going to get all of this lore dumping throughout. I've seen people say, "Oh God, I wish encyclopedia would shut up." I was like, I wanted him to tell me more. Like I just wanted more. I'd like give me as much of that shit as you can. But it's quite a nice nice way of like building that world. There are obviously so many ways that they do it in the game, but encyclopedia in particular. Like someone will just throw out a term that's unique to the world, and then encyclopedia will go, "Oh, by the way, this means all of this stuff." It's really cool. Not many questions left. So, as an artist, of course, and someone who loves music, I'm really interested to know what like your impressions were. I mean, you start off on the main menu, right, and it's immediately like this moving watercolor painting, but obviously there's various facets in like the portrait design and the world and all the rest of it, coupled with the Sea Power soundtrack. So I'm interested from someone who has the interest that you do, what was your impressions of that when you were first playing it?
Interestingly, I loved it within the game, but there was never an interest for me to listen to it outside. Just as you were describing it, I was thinking that I was like, it's fascinating how much I love that soundtrack, but have no interest
Hmm.
to decouple it from its visuals.
Yeah, they do. It is like completely synonymous with each other, right? The sound
Yeah.
and the design, I do think, because there's that moment when you first walk out of the whirling in rags and the horns kick in, and it's the first time you see like this wider perspective of Martinez, right? Um, kind of touched on that, but I'm always interested in the elevator pitch from people. So, how would you? And again, you pointed out this is. I'm loving how this is all tying in because you do pitch games, right? So, if you've got the task of taking Disco Elysium to a studio today, what is your elevator pitch?
So here's the interesting thing about my process. I, as an artist, you have to come to terms with things you're not good at and things you're very good at. And so you try to shift everything in your favor, right? To get to it. So you see my art. It has a very like infographic-y kind of design style that is like the inside of my head.
Yep.
That gets me in the room to then talk about it for 3 hours.
Mm.
I'm terrible at elevator pitches. I'm in the process of writing one right now, and I have a partner, and I'm like, you're just gonna have to do this. I'm just gonna have to tell you everything that is the tent poles and the keep, and then I'm just gonna be like, ugh, like
Yeah.
I'm not even gonna question it because I'm terrible at brevity. I'm afraid of it.
Mm.
I am afraid of small talk. If I see somebody that I marginally know in a in like a social setting, I will literally hide from them like a fucking child until they leave to avoid that like, so what are you doing? Yeah, it's really nice out. This is the weather. How's your dog? Oh, it's fine. Like
Yeah.
it makes me want to fucking explode. And unfortunately, this ties into this idea of somebody sitting down going, let me tell you the fucking, you know what I mean? Let me get your attention
Yeah.
and for an extended thing. So I sit back, I let my fun pictures and everything kind of gather intrigue.
Mm.
And then I sit down and I'm like, bring a lunch because we're gonna really dig into this.
So yours is
So
more of
so
a
unfortunately, when I talk to people about this game, I am a mess. I'm the worst person to pitch this to people.
amazing. Yeah, I'm probably not too far from a similar shaped boat, to be honest, because like everyone always like, oh, well, the elevator pitches you're a drunk detective. Like, well, they already did that. They put that on. They put that on the front cover. I think we need to come up with a different one. But no, so again, it's just really nice to see how you think about stuff. Last question. And it's been a real pleasure talking to you, Josh. By the way,
You too, man.
and this is more of a fun one. I want you to tell me where you, as a citizen of Revachol, would fit into the world.
Oh, fuck. Probably not well. I again, I don't have a lot of patience for a lot of the characters like I do in the world that characters, but in real life,
Yeah.
interacting with people in my 40s is like the last thing I want to do. Yeah, like I'm like I don't have time for whatever this is.
Are
Like
you just
I'm
got
on
the cafeteria manager? Just look, leave me alone, pay your bill, do what you're here to do, and fuck off.
but I won't be direct about it at all. I will sit there and endure it uh, because of some misshapen kindness. I will sit there and be like, oh, that's fucking interesting, and then it, yeah, and then can't wait to go and write it down somewhere and be like, this is there's something in here. There's something really good. So yeah, I'm not a European. I might immigrate to Poland at some point in time. It's actually kind of on my list
Mm.
because I work remotely and I don't have to live anywhere anymore. So
Yeah.
So, but it's so easy breezy there, you know,
Yeah.
like, and I don't like that. I don't like vacations. I like working. I
Yeah.
like making things and stuff. And you know, everybody in that world kind of has their own shit going on, and yeah, I just don't think I could interact with it like effectively.
Yeah. No, I like it. It's funny actually. You mentioned you got quite a nice love affair with Europe, and it's I've always like when people talk about culture shock. I've heard it said many times by people who have lived in both America and Europe that the culture shock from, like, take my example, you moving from the UK to say France would be way easier for me to adapt to than moving to the United States because of the difference in just so many things that you probably wouldn't even think about. I always think a funny example, and it's, I mean, this is really tiny one, but the tax system at like retail in America is mind-boggling to me. I don't like we have VAT here, right? So it's in when you buy something, that's the price. I remember my dad giving me and my sister $1 for the dollar store, right? And then we get I don't know what, $1.20 or something. Is it 20% or something like that?
Yeah,
that'll be
seven
$2.40.
7%.
And I was like, what do you mean? It says $1 store on the sign. We've got $1 each. So there's little things like that. And then, like, don't you have to keep all of your receipts for the tax return at the end or something? Or is that?
The craziest, dumbest thing in the world. Like they know how much you made. You have to prove to them that you're
Yeah,
not lying about it effectively.
yeah, crazy. Yeah, and just that's yeah, just one little thing that just popped in my head there. Um, Listen, it's 2.5 hours of some of the most fascinating insights into who you are and what you've done, and what you're up to now, Josh. I hope you've enjoyed speaking to me as well. I'm sure that the fans of the podcast will absolutely love it. But yeah, I'm out of questions, which means we're out of stuff to talk about. Thank you very, very much for joining. I don't know when this will go live, but yeah, it will. I'll keep you informed.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it, David, and I very much enjoyed this.
Good. And look, if you ever want to come back, this will keep rumbling on. The door is always open. If you, if the marketing lines up with Judas and you want to come and talk about it, then my door's always open.
That's awesome. Thank you, Dave. Really
No
appreciate
worries.
it.
All right. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. What's left of it, and I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah.
Cheers, buddy. Bye bye.
Bye.